The show today is no exception to some of the great work that I've done in the past.
Previously on the Diablocritics.
How did you get this number?
You guys are so fun to hang out with.
Oh, let me tell you something there, brother.
My motivation was just to have an opportunity to hang out with all you guys.
In all seriousness, like, this is why I think what we're doing here is so important. Kip, this will be not unlike our excellent videos that we've done in the past.
You know who also saw Satan's Guide to the Bible? Was Mike Winger.
He generally seems surprised every time, so it's really, I mean, he's a good...
It's like you just noticed it.
This propaganda.
Yeah, these Christians, but they're not real Christians because they're not fundamentalists like I am, right? Okay.
John Barton, A History of the Bible. This is phenomenal. John Barton is not only one of the most influential Bible scholars at Oxford, also an Anglican priest.
I love it that somebody would call Assyriology like a soft,
Yeah,
I know, right? That's
He
crazy.
literally wrote on clay tablet.
I would have a heart attack. The inerrancy of Scripture. It's like a gut punch.
It's like, no, if you got a case to make your case. And that door is shut for ETS. Biblical scholars, if you got the data, share the data. Make your argument. If it's better, we will shift to that.
Yeah, shift the
period.
paradigm. It's because we don't have to come up with another way to, figure out how Nabonidus can be Nebuchadnezzar's son. We don't have to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Who's wrong with it?
Hey, there's this new information and a new paradigm for how we look at these things. Let's let that affect our research, and then even though it might cost us a job, we're gonna do the research right.
Feminist scholars are considered peripheral and secondary and not central biblical scholarship. All of it would have to shift. The center of biblical scholarship, which is predominantly white male, right? And of course that is shifting.
Is the authorship of the book of Daniel an open question among scholars?
No.
There's a reason why I try really hard not to drop the F-bomb when I go live.
It's not like it's 50% and 50%. No, it's like 98% and you, Mike.
They just need that little tiny sliver of not impossible, because they're speaking to people who already agree with them and just want to be made to feel like...
Hold up Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict and said, what are the critical scholarly arguments against the data dam? I seriously think that's all he did.
If people come in with a particular framework, then what you really need to do is to spend time helping people understand this new one.
It ignores the history of scholarship as well.
Right.
Like, whether you're talking about the Pentateuch, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Daniel, whatever, this all was an outgrowth of faithful scholars saying, I don't feel comfortable with this, this doesn't make any sense, what's going on here? Right. And over literally centuries coming around to these conclusions.
They were trying to prove the validity of Mosaic. Oh, there's a whole point. Yeah. God, it's like they don't know. And
if you know scholarship like Albright, this was a massive challenge to how he would write and how he would keep contributing to scholarship, because he wasn't finding what he thought should be there.
Matt's got red wine.
We all
like
just
communion,
had
Matt.
terrible fathers, and that's
It's
why
it's like 8 o'clock at night here. Sorry, guys.
Well, good
who
morning,
killed the music?
everyone.
That was fun.
You guys missed it. Jen was rocking out backstage there. There's a secret metalhead in there somewhere, Jen. I'm convinced of it. So. Well, welcome everyone. It's Sunday, March the 17th. It's 11:05 here on the West Coast, and welcome to the second episode of the Diablocritics. My name is Kip Davis. I'm a Hebrew Bible scholar and a specialist in early Judaism and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I am joined by four of my very good friends, and we're here to talk about bad biblical scholarship. So maybe if we could just go around and everyone introduce yourselves and let us know what you do. I would say go like clockwise or counterclockwise, but I suspect that we're in different positions on everybody's computer screen. So maybe start with Dan, and
All right.
then Josh and Matt and Jen.
Well, hey, everybody. My name's Dan McClellan. I am a public-facing scholar of the Bible and religion. You can find me all over social media. I go by @McClellan, MAKLELAN, which is a phonetic spelling of my last name that I used when I lived in South America. And I specialize in cognitive science of religion, cognitive linguistics, and a bunch of critical methodologies within biblical scholarship proper. And I enjoy giving people a hard time about things, just, because it makes me feel big. That's the impression I get from the comment section. But
Right.
and yeah, I'm
But
an enemy. I hate the Bible. I hate God. I hate Christians. And all the rest.
That's why we're
You're a
here,
bully
right?
with a large platform, with a big platform, right?
Everyone who hates the Bible spends their entire life studying it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Yes, Doctor, this isn't my field of expertise. Welcome.
Thank you. I am Joshua Bowen. It wasn't a mistake what Kip said. I am the fifth friend. I'm the fifth person. There's four other people that he really likes, and then there's me. So, I'm an Assyriologist, but I also, have some background in Hebrew Bible. So I tend to talk about those things an awful lot, and I feel like I work a little bit with. Thank you, Dan.
It's a really good book.
I appreciate that. I was going to say it was a lot of fun to write, but I mean, like with a topic like that, I don't think you can say something like that. So
there's never been a book that was fun to write.
But,
Little fun
I feel
parts
like
of it, but
right. I end up doing a lot of anti-apologetic stuff online. So yeah, good to be here.
Thanks, Matt.
Oh, sorry. I'm just watching the end of the Men United Liverpool match.
That's how interesting my introduction
Get your head
was.
in the game, Matt. Get your head in the
Literally,
game.
United won, and they scored in the 120th minute, and now has won. So the match is over. I apologize for my distraction. It must have we must have won because I was here with you guys. Anyway, I am Dr. Matt Munger, and I am an associate professor of Near Eastern Languages and Literature at MF Norwegian School of Theology, Religion, and Society in Oslo, Norway. I work with reception history. I do reception of older Near Eastern traditions and texts and stuff in the Bible, and then reception of biblical themes and stuff in later literature. So I like to point out how things get recycled and reused and show up in new contexts, and then talk about what it means when they do. And my YouTube is Bible was written backwards, but I guess I'm more of a private-facing scholar, where Dan's like public-facing. But I do stuff from time to time. So yeah.
Evidently, you should have included a spoiler alert on your comments about the game. By the way, somebody in the comments was DVDing it.
The viewership just dropped.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Brian. Oh my gosh. I will. I apologize. It's.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We all hate it when that happens, don't we?
Yeah. Yep.
So.
My bad. So I'll just tell you what happens this week on. No, I'm just kidding.
Awesome.
Wow.
Jen.
Yeah. Hi. I'm a New Testament biblical scholar. I do feminist work and talk about the materiality of texts, what they look like, the kinds of things that take place in our lives that we tend to think about and perpetuate and endorse because of biblical texts, often unconsciously. So that's a big piece of what I do. I do that. Oh, thank you so much. My latest book, yes, Marriage in the Bible. What do the texts say? If for those who thanks, you guys.
My copy just came this last week.
Yeah, I'm really touched, honestly. Yeah, so that's my latest. That's the thing I'm talking about lately. People want to talk about marriage and want to turn to the Bible first as their starting point. Let's be really, really honest about what it actually is and is not saying on that topic, and move from there. Also, recently I've been because of an interview on Myth Vision. Actually, was invited to collaborate on an open letter to Congress around this IVF thing and the Alabama ruling. So that's consumed my last 2 weeks, and it's been quite a thrill to work on. But yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I have a website, actually, that's the easiest way to get to all my stuff, jennifergracebird.com. So
Excellent.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, this is great. So here we are. This is the thing. We are usually with our good friend David McDonald over at Deep Drinks Podcast, but he unfortunately could not be here today. And because there are already, after 12 minutes, over 300 people watching, I just can't follow the chat and what's going on. So and that's what David ordinarily does for us. He keeps things on track. I have enlisted the help of a good friend of mine who volunteered to do this on his day off. Dapper Dinosaur is with us today, people, to keep everything to keep the clock running on time and to look after the chat. So Dapper Dinosaur, thanks so much for
welcome.
being here.
Yeah, I'm Dapper Dinosaur. Hello. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about who you are, where we can find you, and then what's going to happen today.
All right. Start off with, I am a professional linguist.
I am not a professional linguist. I have been accused of such, including by at least, I think, 2 panel members today. But I am not, in fact, a linguist. I have a YouTube channel. I do about 3 videos a week over there. There's 2 live streams, one on Tuesday, one on Saturday, and I have a scripted video that comes up every Thursday. If you look for Dapper Dinosaur, I should pop up. If you see a green T-Rex who's teaching you how to code and make video games, you are on the wrong Dapper Dino. So, I'm the brown one who does things like counter young Earth creationist claims, because that is the focus of my channel. So it's not the exclusive focus. I've also got other weird science conspiracy theories. I've got a few things about Bible stuff, like I've had Dr. Kip on to talk about. Okay, well, so since Behemoth is probably not a sauropod, what can we actually say about it? Because spoiler alerts, it's not a sauropod. But yeah, that's my channel. Feel free to stop by if you like. And I'm not going to be involved in too much of the discussion. I'm going to be mostly popping back in when there's a Q&A. But that being said, this is, of course, as Kip said, a monthly show reviewing bad biblical scholarship on YouTube, with scholarship very much in scare quotes, right? There will be a Q&A after about an hour and a half. I will be keeping track of things like super chatted questions or questions that I think are particularly pertinent. If you have a question for a particular person, please make sure that you say like question for and then the name. So that way when I'm reading them, we're not confused as to who the question is for. And basically, that's pretty much it. This is, that's how this is going to roll.
Awesome. Well, thanks for helping us out, Dapper. We do
question. Can we just ask the dinosaur question that's very pertinent here before he cuts out? Did you exist at the same time as humans?
Well, he does now.
I think I can answer that one. Okay.
Were you on the Ark?
Were you? Why did you miss the Ark?
As the sole surviving Ceratosaurus from the Jurassic period, I can say for certain that there was never a global flood, and that apart from me, no non-avian dinosaurs ever existed with humans. However, humans have always existed with dinosaurs because birds are just as much a dinosaur as I am or as a Triceratops is.
I think one of the funniest single panel cartoons I've seen that was not drawn by Gary Larson has a dinosaur on 2 dinosaurs on a little piece of land that's sticking out from the water, and there's Noah's Ark off in the distance, and the one says, "Oh crap, was that today?" to the other. And oh, so good.
Awesome. So we're doing something a little new today. If everyone noticed, we are actually simulcasting this on multiple channels at the same time, and this is an experiment. This is new for us. The idea is to try and consolidate everything into one place. When it comes to the Q&A, I encourage everyone to super chat your questions for priority. If you have specific questions for specific scholars, please include their name in your question. We will be addressing those at the end of the stream after we've gone through this video from Mike Winger. So now we do have some questions about it. There does seem to be it does seem that maybe there's something different on different screens depending on where you're watching it. So hopefully this works, right, guys? Let's hope. But I think we're ready to get into the video here. You guys, well, we had a refresher at the beginning of what happened last time. You guys ready for this?
It's
ready
better
to dive
this
back
time,
in?
right? Like you make better arguments in this one. Okay, great.
I assume so. So I'm just gonna. Oh no, not that. Sorry, I need to get better at this. I am going to pull the video up. All right, everyone. Can everyone see it? Is it there yet? Yes. I think I have to pull it up, don't I? Yeah, no, it's there. Okay. Good. All right. I'm gonna hit play. I've got this divided into sections. Jump in if you absolutely have to say something, but it'll be quicker if we just wait till the section breaks to say things. But you know how this goes. Let's see how this plays out.
So they select, Bart Ehrman, who is well known, at least among certain circles that I'm in, well known for being somebody who tends to, when doing popular writings and in popular settings like this interview, he tends to say things in much stronger and exaggerated ways to make his claims seem more strong and even more scholarly solid than we would think they really are. So that does happen. I wonder why he's quoting them and not the supposed Protestant pious believers that are sourced.
So I really thought we start with that. In large part because this is one of these things, right? When it comes to apologists and critiquing biblical scholarship in particular, there's one guy out there that they all want to go after, and that's Dr. Bart Ehrman. In fact, my good friend Apologia has coined a fallacy. For just this moment. This is the argumentum ad Bartum. So and
certainly that's not how you decline Bart in Latin.
That's right.
Well,
that's Akkadian, Dan.
Ad Barty.
This is something that I certainly hear a lot. And I thought maybe it'd be worthwhile just getting this out of the way right from the get-go. And a complaint I hear a lot is, well, Bart will say these super controversial, crazy things when he writes books for HarperCollins. But then when it comes to his actual academic scholarly work, he's way more reserved, and it's nothing at all like what he's willing to say out in the open.
I mean, to steel man the position, before, right? I mean, like if we're being charitable, I think it's good for all of us to recognize, as we do, and I know this is a bit of a truism, but like we all have biases, right? And when you combine that with speaking to what Bart is speaking to, and that is like a lay audience of interested non-specialists. He's going to make things simpler often, right, for the sake of his audience. And when you do that, you end up saying things. For example, I do this all the time. People ask me, did the Exodus happen? Well, that can be a very complicated question, right? But I kind of get a feel for what the audience that is asking that question means. And so I'll say no. Right. But I know what they mean by that is as presented in the Hebrew Bible. If we were to go back with a camcorder, would we see 3 million people marching out of Egypt during the late Bronze Age? No. Right. But that could be, strong, definitive, sort of a position.
Yeah.
So I get that. Right. And so I think, to be fair, we should say, yeah, we all should guard against that sort of thing. Of course, the first thing I thought when Mike said that was, please provide an example, Senior Winger.
Exactly.
What exactly are you referring to? Can you give me an example of one of these things where he says this over the top, really emphatic thing that's just totally wrong? If you could, put that on the screen for us, that would be great. And I suspect we'll be waiting a while.
Yeah.
And I think the audience is such a big part of this, because this is actually something that my agent and my publisher were both like, hey, Dan, you are still writing to convince colleagues.
Exactly.
You're supposed to be sharing your opinion with the public. And it's something that I struggle with. And as somebody who makes content for the general public on social media, there's absolutely different ways to package these things. And some of it has to do with the terminology and how accessible the language is. Some of it has to do with understanding the perspective of your audience and knowing what questions they have, what knowledge they do and do not have, and how to frame things. Some of it has to do with making it strike certain notes and tones that you want to strike, so that what you're presenting is not only accessible, but also of interest to the audience. We were talking before the show started about how a lot of people don't like dealing with all the linguistic minutia of some of the languages that we have to deal with. And, I can't make a video about clitics and not just get 1,000 comments that you can predict from people who really don't care one way or another. So, it's just different audiences, and I don't think there's anything that Bart has said that I have heard, either in a debate or in some kind of presentation or in a book, that if we said, hey, unpack that, he would not be able to go, okay, yeah, here are the data, and yes, it's a little more complex than the way I stated it, but if I stated it any other way, then I've got to spend another 10 minutes explaining what's going on. And it's just a lot easier to say, no, the Exodus didn't happen.
Right. I think just Bart's woefully ignorant, though. The scholars
woefully ignorant.
And the one other thing I wanted to say, how fun is that? Is that when scholars are talking about ideas, we tend to have an assumption that the other scholars understand the implications of what's being said. That because we're familiar with it, that a general audience needs to have brought to the fore for them. And it almost sounds like you're, so it means that you are maybe kind of repeating or making something sound, kind of coming at it multiple times in order to drive that home, I guess. And that might make it sound or seem like what Mike is saying, right? He's making it way more extreme or intense or whatever than it actually is. Well, that's actually about making sure people understand the importance and the main takeaway, I would say. But yeah, as well, and it's what these two said.
No, it's something that keeps coming up over and over again, and I feel like it's probably something that we just need to we need to keep
Bart in our prayers. Oh,
we yes,
but
I
I think the opposite side of this is also very interesting, because what they really have, I've seen this a lot actually recently, where people say, "Oh, well, Bart Ehrman said it, so then it must be wrong," and actually this kind of propaganda, to use Mike Winger's term, has become very common among apologists, because there's this idea that because he in some places has said things previously that now are no longer the consensus position, or things that aren't precise when he's in an interview or things like that. They'll say, well, he's wrong about everything, and then we can make fun of him because he said something that wasn't perfect once. And and it's really interesting the way that has like kind of propagated into this. Well, if Bart Ehrman says it, then it must be wrong. And it's just so, yeah, it's just so interesting to see that, because so many people have learned a lot from Bart, and both the scholarly side and the popular side are really full of knowledge that most people would benefit from learning. So,
and I think it's an unfair criticism as well. I don't know any scholar who would love for their work to be as publicly accessible as Bart Ehrman's is. Like everything you've said for decades. I don't like people sharing videos of mine that I made last year, because I'm like, ooh, that was a different time. So I think it is an unfair attempt to just kind of rack up rhetorical points, because there's not really any substance to this criticism. Like, this has no relevance to the rest of Mike's point. This is just, let's score a point. Let's bring Ehrman down a peg. And it's kind of the beginnings of a Gish Gallop. We're just going to throw all the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks.
That's it, right? It's interesting too. This also works. This kind of actually works in the opposite direction, where when you do have like people who do Christian apologetic work, who also do work in scholarship, you can see the same thing happening in reverse, right? Guys who present papers both at SBL and at ETS, the Society of Biblical Literature, and at the Evangelical Theological Society, those papers are going to look a lot different from one another, precisely on the same spectrum that we're talking about here.
And that's why I think, and we can move on, but like that's why I think it's a fair critique, right? But the thing is, you have to accompany it with an example. Right? That for me, that's the key. So like when I talk about somebody like James Hoffmeyer, I think James Hoffmeyer does some brilliant work, right? Excavated what Attila Borg, and like he's a great Egyptologist. Same with Kenneth Kitchen, did a lot of great work in the field. But it's just when their theological commitments sort of, cross paths with the thing that they're trying to argue for, that you end up with specific things like, the 600 alafim. Does it mean 600,000? Does it mean 600 military units? Well, for like 2 millennia, this hasn't been an issue. It's been 600,000, right? But now that we know that New Kingdom Egypt didn't have 3 million, or had only 3 million people estimated, you can't have the entire population of New Kingdom Egypt walking out of Egypt in the Exodus. So then, well, it must not mean that, right? Well, that sort of betrays, I think, that theological commitment, because we can't just say the text was wrong, right? You can't say that. So you have to come up with some other reason. Maybe LF means something else here. So those are the sorts of examples I think you should point out, and that's why I want one from Mike.
Be nice. Well, let's move on here, shall we? Make sure I've got that up. Yeah, I do. Okay.
The evangelical scholars, the ones who would be defending against the claims of Satan's guide to the Bible here, their case is never presented. Sometimes claims from them are presented where they just say something, but their evidence, their case, or their reasons for those claims are not presented. So it looks as though they're making sort of faith proclamations instead of actually providing their scholarship on an issue. But when you go to the skeptic, when the skeptics are quoted, the Ehrmans and the Avalos and these other guys, they get claims and evidence. They're going to unpack their reasons and their evidence. And more often than not, in fact, in almost every case, they don't give any scholarly response against those claims. There's no pushback whatsoever, even when those claims are in the minority of scholarship, even though the video pretends they're in the majority. Compare this to, say, like my Women in Ministry series. In that video series, I quote extensively from egalitarians, the people I think are wrong. Extensively, I quote their arguments for their cases. I hold strong cases in response to their arguments. I often share the pushback they'd have to that as well. That is when you're trying to give somebody both sides of the coin. Like, I want to introduce you guys to the world of scholarship on the egalitarian, complementarian, women in ministry debate.
Again, I want that specific example, right? Mike, what are we talking about? What is the minority fringe position that the video presented that that scholars, if you were to go to mainstream scholarship, that they would say, oh my gosh, that's fringe. Where is that?
Right.
I don't see it.
See, Satan's Guide to the Bible too. Like, this was This was a very would you call it a populist kind of documentary? Like it's got this. We talked a little bit about this last time. It's got an intended audience in view here. So of course you're not going to jump into the weeds of all the arguments on
Right, exactly.
every nuance, right? Like it's a nitpick.
It is, and I think we talked about this a little bit the first last time, because when the audience that you have in mind kind of already is familiar with the conservative framework, then what you really do need to present is this alternative idea or concept that is, again, as Josh was saying, much more actually mainstream than what a conservative or fundamentalist like Mike is going to be even looking at, right? I mean, if you look at an ETS conference, of course, the idea is that typical biblical scholarship are endorsing are going to seem fringe or minority or whatever, but that's it's all about your starting point, I guess, or what you consider normative, which is again back to his other comments about objectivity versus what's faith. Sorry, I'm getting off to other things. Sorry. Stay with this clip. Stay with the clip, Jen.
Did any of you guys watch Mike Winger's 12-hour video about women in ministry?
Oh God, no.
Can I ask a question? I'm so sorry because I see this in the side chat. I'm trying not to look at it, but there's a comment that says, "Didn't Winger refer to Megan Lewis as a Jezebel?" Is that true?
I have no idea.
I saw that too, and I was like, I hope Josh doesn't see that.
Yeah,
boy.
Because I have no.
I embrace.
knowledge
I've
of
been
that.
called Jezebel just this last week. I'm like, yes, I will embrace that.
Well, I would just say, if that is true, pull up, Mike. Stop running. Right? If you're going to talk shit about my wife, you wouldn't step in the ring with her. That's what I'd say. You wouldn't step in the ring with her, Mike. She'd drop you like a sack of dirt. I stand right by that.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, on that note,
yeah.
Shall we?
I don't even remember what we were talking about, so I think we can go to the next clip.
we can just go to the next one here, can't we? All right.
Let me share with you guys about the moral problems of the Bible that this video talks about. They have a clip where they talk about Jephthah, and they suggest that the Bible is totally cool with sacrificing human beings for God's favor. Yeah, those of you who read the Bible, you don't need to be a scholar to know this is weird.
Baloney. My God is not cool with killing innocent children for divine favors in battle.
That may be, but the God of the Bible is.
Victory in battle is related.
And that, I'm so sorry, but that was such such a beautiful distinction. And I loved it when I heard it, because the kid said, my God would not be okay with that. And Satan said, that may be true, but the God of the Bible is. And this is something that I think people just do not catch.
Absolutely.
Right? Yep. Interpretive models drive interpretations.
Right.
So that little girl, absolutely, it could be the case that the way that she filters the biblical texts creates a God that she understands, and good for her, right? I wish that everybody did that, right? Or at least admitted that they did it. But that's something. No, my interpretation is the right one, and there is no such thing. Like, what does that even mean? So yeah, that was actually pretty brilliant, I think.
And I would add that even the God of the Bible itself is a negotiation.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You would say that the God of whoever wrote Judges 11.
That's right.
Like 100% was like, hey, Jephthah was like, I need help against the Ammonites.
That's right.
Tell you what, I'll sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my door. And God's like, well, I know what's going to happen, but sounds great, and helps him win.
Exactly.
And then it's his daughter, and he's like, damn it. All right, well, let's do this thing. And then he continues to have military success. Like, people are like, God didn't accept it. According to the narrative, there doesn't seem to be any consequence of this.
That's right.
And he continues to enjoy military success. So it would seem that either
And he assumed that it was effective, right?
Yeah. And
Or
well, that
wouldn't
he was
follow
going to,
through.
there would be consequences if
Yeah,
he did not follow through.
Exactly.
There was no consequences for sacrificing his daughter. And so whoever wrote Judges 11 may be using it as an example of how bad things got, but they represent Adonai 100% accepting that sacrifice.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But at the end of this clip, he gets to this point that we need to talk about.
All right, let's do it.
I'm like,
things to the deity.
In the 11th chapter of the book of Judges, Jephthah, the leader of the Israelites, who are at war with the Ammonites, from Canaan, wanting to secure victory for the Israelites, Jephthah makes a promise to God.
If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering.
The leader of the Israelites promises God he will set fire to whoever greets him first when he returns home from battle.
He will devote to the Lord first thing he sees. But of course, it turns out to be his daughter, his only child. And
I'm back, and I won. Who's behind door number 1?
Welcome home, Daddy.
Is that really what happened? Now, someone expect me here to offer. There's two theories on Jephthah. It's not 100% clear in the text. I think everybody should agree on this. It's not 100% clear in the text whether the daughter actually died or whether she just was celibate for the rest of her life. She goes off in the mountains to mourn her not having children, and then it says he fulfilled his vow.
Can we stop this for a second?
So yeah, let's do that.
It is 100% clear in the text.
It is.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
He
Well,
says
Mike knows Hebrew.
he
well,
says
apparently not English either, because it's clear in English.
Exactly. You just read it in English.
Yeah. He says, I'm going to offer as a burnt offering, as an olah, whatever comes out the door. And then he's like, yeah. And it says he carried through as he promised.
Right.
And
that's what
like
it says.
She said, "My father, if you have opened your mouth to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has given you vengeance against your enemies."
And
this
it would
thing,
be
right? Like, yeah.
And if he was like, well, tell you what, I don't want to do what I said, so
Right.
why don't we just do this other thing that is not what I said, and maybe that'll be good enough. Like, that's not how this works. That's not how oaths work. It's like, well,
And
I don't
this
want
is-
to do the thing, so I'm going to just do this other thing that that you didn't agree with.
Well, and
This
that
is-
would
this
have been
is the
what the
important
story
point
became
too,
about.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Thank
this
you.
is people fixate on, this is about child sacrifice. I mean, the child sacrifice is a vehicle driving the story, but this story is about something else, right? This is about Jephthah's vow
Right.
and how important it is to keep your vows, even those ones
You don't
that
want to.
are
Yeah.
you don't want to.
Yeah.
It's,
Also,
it's
Also, Mike, I can't help but point this out. Mike says that she and her friends are bemoaning that she won't have children, and that's not what the text says either. They mourn that she will not give a man sex, that she will die a virgin, and a woman's virginity is about giving, right, this vehicle for men. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but it does.
did,
But it's a
did
part
you-
of the
I
text,
haven't
the way
got
they
there
think
yet.
about
Did you
things.
talk about that in here at all? So I haven't got that far.
I don't remember specifically from that angle. I think so. I think I did mention it though somewhere.
And I think
Matriarchs,
here's in
patriarchs, laws, and adultery. I'm not sure.
Judges 11:39. V'ya'as la et nidro asher nadar. He did to her according to his vow which he vowed.
Yep.
He vowed to offer as a burnt offering.
Yep.
Like that's not an idiom for this is something
living
I
in
have,
the wilderness.
this is something I have
bemoaning
to,
her virginity.
yeah.
Sorry.
This is
Mike,
something
that
I
was
have to,
Dan reading the Hebrew. That's what that was. Just so you know.
This is something that I have to push back against Joel Baden a little bit, because he doesn't think Exodus 22:29 is about child sacrifice. And he's like, well, it's talking about giving it to the Lord, which just means you're crossing the threshold of the temple. And it doesn't really matter what happens after. It doesn't refer to what happens after the entity has crossed the threshold of the temple. So it can refer to going into a priestly service. And that is over interpreting something that's pretty clear. And so the same thing is true here. You can't read this any other way remotely plausibly as he burnt his daughter to death as a burnt offering to the God who gave him victory over the Ammonites.
Yeah. Well, let's finish this clip because he's got a bunch of a bunch of text that he wants to bring up. I think it's useful if we just spend a few minutes
Fine to
talking
think
about
that
those
he did
two.
actually go through with it. But that's not really the question, is it? The question is this a moral flaw in the Bible? As in, is the Bible the way that these amazing, totally objective scholars who totally represent things your pastors all know? Sorry, it's ridiculous. They present it as though God is cool, quote, cool with killing innocent children for divine favors in battle. Is that true? The God of the Bible is cool with that. No, I want you to think this through. Here's some evidence, okay? There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, and then goes on and on and on. That's Deuteronomy 8:10. Let's look at Ezekiel 13:3. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. This is talking about offerings, because the firstborn belongs to God. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem, meaning you cannot actually offer them. So God claims rights to the firstborn, just like with Abraham and Isaac, but he will not allow them to actually sacrifice their kids, just like Abraham and Isaac. It's interesting when people suggest that the Abraham and Isaac story is proof that God likes human sacrifice, when God refuses to let it go through and says, no, here's a replacement instead. And then he tells all the Israelites, instead of having your son or your firstborn, you're going to offer an animal. I don't want human sacrifices. Then explicitly says in scripture, no, you're not allowed to do that. I hate that sort of thing. In Jeremiah 7:31, we have the following. Did you get any of this from the Satan's Guide to the Bible? No.
What was that?
Okay. Woo. Okay.
Right.
We're going to bring it down. There are two things I want to say here. The first one is that this is presupposing univocality, to say we can govern how we interpret text A by looking over at text M, and we see that says, no, you're not going to do this. And so that means that if it says you are going to do this over here, that it's wrong, that we have to reinterpret
Obviously,
that.
Dan, obviously Israelites were not allowed to keep other Israelites as debt slaves for 6 years. I mean, yeah, sure. It says it here in Exodus, 21 and Deuteronomy 15, but look at Leviticus 25. It says you can't. So that must mean that they weren't allowed to keep them as debt slaves. I mean, come on.
And so it's begging the question by saying, do these things conflict? No, because these things can't conflict. It is presupposing the conclusion, and like particularly with Exodus 13, like that's overwhelmingly agreed to be a later text from Exodus 22. And here's the thing, and the stories about there's a replacement provided. Why do we have rules about sacrificing children and stories about sacrificing children where later layers say, there was a replacement? Why don't we just not have rules about sacrificing children? If you say God wants us to sacrifice the children, but then at the last second you're actually supposed to do something different, how is that not evidence that there was an earlier thing where you did do it, and then somebody came through later and just shellacked the no, you don't on top of it? Like, just don't have a rule about sacrificing children, and that way you sidestep having to go through all these mental gymnastics of but there's a replacement. You're supposed to actually redeem them. This actually refers to giving them over to priestly service. So it means all these other things. And if you acknowledge that there are literary layers and that there is diachronic change here, that's by far and away the most likely explanation of what's going on here. But they're not looking for the most likely explanation. They're trying to gin up the tiniest little sliver of, it's not impossible that my reading works. And
you can't say obviously the serpent in Genesis 3 is Satan. Well, how do you know? Well, let's look at the book of Revelation. It doesn't work that way, right?
And that's about Leviathan anyway.
Right.
If you open with, and if Mike maybe if Mike says this, hey, I'm reading this through my interpretive lens.
That's right.
Fine. Hey,
would
man,
certainly help, right?
What is
Yes.
it? Live your best life, right?
Right.
But you can't then critique critical scholars who are coming to these passages and saying, what did they mean? The passage itself, right? Not how later people interpreted it. Anyway.
Exactly. Yep.
And this is something that they don't even see. And like because I'll make a video saying, Genesis 19 is not warning you about the dangers of homosexuality. Mm-hmm. And people will be like, Leviticus 18 and 20. I didn't say anything about the Bible as a whole. I didn't say anything about your whole worldview. I didn't say anything about anything other than the rhetorical purpose of Genesis 19. And it doesn't get into their heads that these are compartmentalized different texts by different authors. It is a zero-sum game. It is something that it is all unified and holistic, and and this just baffling.
You know, he's drawing something out here that's like it's hard. It's hard enough for readers of the Bible. It's hard for scholars even, right? Like one of the reasons why this issue of child sacrifice is the issue it is because of the way the texts have been constructed over time. Like he's going to read this one here in a minute from Jeremiah chapter 7, right? Where God's like, no child sacrifice. I hate that stuff. I didn't want that. Me want child sacrifice. Why are you looking at me? I didn't want child sacrifice. Don't look at me. I never asked for that. Like, think, why is the text so determined to speak
Establish
against this?
Why is Sargon's name "The King is Legitimate"? Like, why would he call himself that? I mean, it must be that he's legitimate, right? Come on, guys.
That's it. That's it, right? So we finish the clip.
Yeah.
Let's finish the clip, and then we can say a few more things about.
You don't get to know this. He was interested in propaganda, not reality. And they have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire. How does God feel about that? Which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind. It's not something God desires or has told them to do. That's the point. Ezekiel chapter 16. Are there other responses to this? Yeah. Oh yeah, they'll build all these cases on why these verses didn't apply, or they weren't written yet, or they'll have like reconstruct the history in a way that says, nah.
All these actual arguments.
This was a seed.
All these actual arguments, right?
Wait, is he not looking at Ezekiel 20? Where God is like, oh, I gave them commandments which were not good, by which I devastated them and showed them who's boss, causing them to pass their children through the fire. Like that, like Jeremiah's like, oh no, I didn't do that, and Ezekiel's like, hell yeah, I did that. I was showing him who was boss. And you again have disagreement here, but their response is going to be, wait a minute. They all have to agree. And since I like Jeremiah, I'm going to reinterpret Ezekiel 20 and subordinate it to Jeremiah and make it agree with Jeremiah, because that's the governing verse, because that's the one that agrees with my presuppositions. It's like a script that they never depart from in a single syllable.
And what's painful for me in that particular last clip about Ezekiel 16 is that the way Mike reads right past the reference to the whoring and, so you all know what I'm referring to, and I'm not sure if he played it, but just, the fact that Mike is very concerned about X, Y, and Z and can read through this and not be upset by it, not find that problematic, because I understand it's not his point, but that's, I think, a lot of what those of us here are interested in doing is look at what you're also not paying attention to, or, this other part of the language here tells us a lot about, where they're coming from, their framework, how it is something we want to acknowledge and not continue to do. I don't know. That's not quite to the same point that we were talking about in that, but I needed to bring it up.
It's certainly is a worthwhile point though, because this, like that text is
nauseating.
But the thing is,
it's disgusting.
What's so disturbing about it is when they do try to deal with it, right? Reading Daniel Block's comments on it about how, she who tramples underfoot her Lord's grace should expect to receive his wrath.
Yeah.
So
Well, can I saw a comment in the chat from Supreme Scientist who said, and that's a good name. But who said, but God, but they accept that God killed his own son, or whatever. He killed his son, Jesus. Duh. And,
right.
And it's such a good point, because it's like God does not accept child sacrifices.
So, right.
That's
listen,
literally
guys.
what our religion is
just
based
one
on.
final time.
Listen.
It's so good.
I made a whole video about this like a month ago, because another amazing thing that happens in this whole discussion is the ways in which Christian apologists will often twist themselves into pretzels to avoid the obvious that Jesus is a sacrifice. He's a blood offering. Paul is very clear about this.
Yeah.
You know, the book of Hebrews is crystal clear about the implications of this, right? We're dealing with a system of blood magic here. This is what it is. How comfortable are you with this? Really? Think about it.
Yeah. Quite.
Isaac was just, that was a dry run. We were just pre-gaming for
foreshadowing. Yeah.
Oh, come on. You know it was foreshadowing. It was written with that specific purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it was.
The ever-present.
Even when there was.
And that's why Mastema
Omniscient.
shows up in the Jubilees version.
That's right.
Yeah.
Human sacrifice. And we'd have to walk through all that thoughtfully and carefully, right? But I have to respond to the propaganda they put out. And hear God rebuking them. You took your sons and your daughters, whom you had born to me, and these you sacrificed them to be devoured. Is God okay with that? No, this is why he's judging them. He's not complimenting them. Hey, good job. He hates this, right? This is a horrible thing. He says, where you're hoarding so small a matter that you slaughtered my children and delivered them up as an offering by fire to them. This is something God is hateful of, and something that he judges other nations for doing.
So I think right away, I just want to point out it's super ironic right at the outset how much Mike considers the work of scholars propaganda relative to what he's doing, right? It's hilarious. But in that passage, and in a lot of these passages with regards to not just child sacrifice, but any sort of service at all, the issue even there for Yahweh is you're sacrificing them to them. Like you're pulling in these other gods who I never knew, and I don't want you to have participating in the cults. This is the problem, right?
Right.
Yeah, child
It's the
sacrifice
wrong God.
is bad, but
Yeah.
it's the wrong God. So yeah, I don't know. Do we have anything more to say about that? Or
just one more thing
Go ahead.
that pretty much every clip you've played grates my nerves, and it's that everything equates whatever verse he's citing with God is, God says, God thinks, God wants, and it's just like there's no critical distance to say the author of this text is proposing, right? And it's just like, and that's literally like the first step is to be able to say the author of this text is doing something, right? That text or something. I mean, but every single step he's saying God believes, God says, God is, and it's just like, I mean, and I guess that's the difference in the methodologies between an academic methodology and a theological apologist methodology. But when we work with text, we consider that texts do not equate to reality.
Yeah.
And then you have to look at these things, and like even conservative scholars that I know that are academics will do that, like can do that, at least that part, and say like, let's look at what this is actually communicating, and then we can have interesting discussions, because they might say, well, obviously this person is trying to make a rhetorical point out of using this or whatever, and then we can have a discussion about what they actually believed about God, or we can talk about these kind of things from a good, robust academic perspective. But you just can't, when the one option is God actually says it and the other option is nah. And so we're just like
And it's really interesting in a lot of commentaries by conservative scholars, and particularly in commentary series that like endorse inerrancy or something like that, or require it for all the authors in their series. It's interesting to see them try to strike that balance between legitimate scholarship that is trying to understand the rhetorical goals of these authors within their situations and their circumstances, with the requirement that they acknowledge that this is the inerrant word of God, and they have a lot of different ways to try to make it sound scholarly, that they're basically punting to tradition every time, and they have a little bit of space within which they can work to say, well, the author seems to be doing this, that, and the other, but ultimately you cannot violate that expectation that this be held up as the very word of God, even if they've got to say, like, the author had no idea what their words were going to be intended to mean, but they were, they were just being controlled by some sense of inspiration, and were totally oblivious to what we know God was really trying to say. It's pretty silly.
It's pretty silly.
It's pretty silly. All right. So I think the next clip, Mike talks a little bit about the I guess the what's the word? The fickleness. Maybe that's the word of scholarship. That pesky scholarship just keeps changing.
Is this then the Bible being totally cool with killing innocent children for divine favors in battle? No. And if scholars think it is, scholars are wrong. It's okay to say that. Am I the propagandist now? Because scholars are like the holier than thou group of people, and if they agree on something, no one's allowed to disagree. Because otherwise,
I mean, he should just wear a
wrong.
sign
No,
around his neck that says, "I wish I had a formal education." Right? That's what he should do. Just, I wish I had a PhD. Right?
But the guy who made a 12-hour video to tell women what they're not allowed to do in the church says that scholars are the holier than thou people.
and notice
Irony
he keeps reducing this down to the Bible says, what the Bible thinks, what the Bible says.
Always.
And
because that is God, right?
Not a single one of the authors of any one of these texts ever lived to see anything that approximates what we call the Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
The Bible
Isn't
didn't
that the
exist
truth?
within
Yeah.
centuries of the life of anyone who wrote any of this. So they have no concept of that. And that's just why is that? They can't even engage that. They can't even acknowledge that problem.
Well, see, that's the real issue here, right? Is that he's making what I guess amounts to a category error, right? And now I feel like I'm getting into philosophy, so sorry, Kip's all.
Time to move on, guys.
Yeah, right. But I mean, because what the argument here is that he's saying these scholars are wrong about what the Bible says. But the problem is that scholars in this particular context are doing an internal critique. Right? That's what they're doing. So they're coming to this interpretive framework and saying, is there consistency here? Dan, I cannot imagine that anytime somebody yells out from your comment section, Leviticus 18, Leviticus 20, that you're like taking a pen out and furiously writing those down. I've never seen these before. Leviticus, what was it now? 18? My God, I've got to go read this. Like, what is it that... So, like this idea that he's going to read these passages out and it's going to be somehow damning to the position of the critical scholar just reveals that he's not treating it fairly. Because what Satan's Guide to the Bible, what the video is doing this internal critique. Right. And saying, look, based on this interpretive model, how do you account for these things? And you can't turn around to answer it and say, well, look at the whole thing. It's the whole point of what the internal critique is doing.
That's right.
Bingo.
What the Bible is and is not is just basic stuff that you learn in most seminaries that he has not learned. And he's just got this great platform for perpetuating this really awful cluelessness about what he's doing. But it's driven by his faith convictions, right? His very important to him. And,
Dr. Jen thinks you should go to seminary, Mike. It's a good place to start.
I think you should go to a particular version of seminary. I'm not sure.
I don't know that we want to arm him with first-year Greek. I don't know that that's a good idea, guys.
I actually think he knows some Greek. I actually think he does.
Yeah.
But,
he's enough to be dangerous, though. I mean, it's
probably.
By definition,
it's not. It's not. It's not.
Well, hey, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that Satan knew Hebrew. He talked to Eve, you know. So
in Hebrew,
Yeah.
the world's first language. I
mean,
learned
but
yesterday.
the Syriacs actually thought it was Syriac. I mean, there's a lot of great Syriac texts that argue that the language of creation was Syriac.
I had
that's amazing.
I had a friend in seminary, and I'll shut up, but wrote his thesis on how, like, looking at Genesis 5 to get at Proto-Semitic. So, I'll just let all that sink in.
Well, didn't you know that
Wild.
if you line up all the names, it tells the story of
tells
Jesus'
the
The story of
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, that's right. In Genesis 5, isn't it?
Do we have time to answer one of these super chat questions?
We were going to save them till the end.
Oh, save
but,
them until the end. Okay, then we'll save
yeah.
them till the end.
So I figured that's the easiest way to do it.
All right, then let's keep rolling. We deserve.
Let's
to
roll,
get to the
guys.
super chats.
Okay.
In the 1700s, there was all kinds of skeptical, ungodly scholarship against the Bible that has just disappeared because of the discovery of ancient manuscripts and archaeology that has proven so many things wrong that scholars all
ungodly
believed not too long ago. And that does happen occasionally. And so we need to be aware of this and look at the actual reasons for a claim, not just who's making the claim.
So it warms the cockles of my heart to hear him talk about all those manuscripts that have proven the Bible absolutely perfectly correct.
And what's silly is I've seen a lot of these claims. Oh, scholars used to think this, scholars used to think that, and then we discovered this and that. And I've tried to find the scholars who have and frequently they never said any such thing whatsoever. People are just making these things up.
Well, it's similar to the way we keep hearing about how nobody adheres to the documentary hypothesis anymore, right? I mean, I keep hearing this all the time.
Well, that was when I was at Trinity Western. We had a master's student who had just come from an MDiv, and we were in the Old Testament seminar class, and they were talking about source criticism. And this student, who's a good friend of mine, and raised his hand kind of sheepishly and was like, I just came from my MDiv, and we were taught that that scholarship had rejected the documentary hypothesis, and that everybody agreed that it was Mosaic authorship. And the professor there was a lot more understanding and gentle than I would have been at the time. But yeah, basically it's like, oh, there's internal critique going on with the documentary hypothesis. We have the rejection of E and J as full documentary sources, that these are probably just fragments that are pretty much limited to Genesis and Exodus. And that gets repackaged as the entire foundation of source criticism has crumbled.
Right.
And so we must default back to Mosaic authorship. And they're like, no, this is advancing critical source criticism. Now it's D and P and non-P. And so we've actually kind of made it a little harder on ourselves.
And it's moving. It's going in the other direction too, right? Like that's the amazing thing now is we've got increasing scholarly discussion about how much of this stuff just started in the Persian period, in the Hellenistic period, right? Like it's not getting closer to Moses, guys. It's just not.
And I think
go ahead, Josh. This is the other, Matt, you said something that grates on you. Listening to people talk about how early critical scholarship was there to disprove the Bible, right? Or was ungodly, as Mike just said, or how all these archaeologists, throughout the 20th century were just there to try to disprove they were just atheistic. Like, pick up a book, right? Like, read anything about the history of scholarship on Pentateuchal formation or on early, like Palestinian archaeology, because, guess what? A lot of these guys were like, we got to figure out how Moses did write this, right? Which are the Mosaic parts, right? So it's only as time has gone by where it's just become less and less tenable to hold to such a position of like even, something even close to the single Mosaic authorship. So yeah, I mean, he just, this just to me tips his hand and he actually doesn't know this topic at all.
No idea. No.
And even I see apologists who will quote Berman on the Pentateuch.
Joshua Berman.
And be like, see, it's all a sham. It's like Berman's like, here are a couple of verses where a handful of scholars are going beyond the mark, and that doesn't mean that the whole project is illegitimate. It just means there are a handful of scholars who are going beyond the mark. And sometimes it's the majority of scholars. But that's what the internal critique is. That is the back and forth that advances the whole project, that makes our positions stronger and stronger. And it's none of this is corroding the foundation, the observation that these texts are consolidating numerous different fragments by numerous different authors and editors.
Yeah, when
we have another like side to it too, that within scholarship there are people doing other things that are saying, I don't care about the documentary hypothesis, but I want to know what the final form is saying to the community which had that final form. They're looking at, I mean, like when you look at other ways of reading texts that are legitimate areas of research, scholars will say things like that, like, there's no point in trying to figure it out because we never will. So I'm going to read it in its form, and then I'm happy to do that. Exactly. And that's like, that is also something that is legitimate. And we don't, like in scholarship, we don't fight about whether or not you're allowed to say, I'm just going to read the final form and use it for my research in post-colonial studies or in whatever. It's like, you're just like, whatever. Okay, cool. Like, and we read that and we learn something from that, but it's not learning anything about the documentary hypothesis because those people have said they're not interested in it. And then, it's just really funny too, because those things get used, like get picked up occasionally by people who aren't in the field and that want to say, oh, well, look, these people have accepted the final form and that's the only thing they're reading. And you're like, no.
And no, the Bible has not reached its final form yet. It will continue to change. Josh, I wanted to hear what you were starting to say.
Yep.
Oh, just when you said, people have been saying, you hear people say, wasn't the documentary hypo? I thought the way that you were going to go is, like the seminary student, I heard that it's been sort of like debunked and everybody's going toward tradition historical, right? I didn't think the final part of that was, so
backwards.
Moses wrote it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
That's why that's I just wanted to say that.
That would be a quality MDiv. But higher quality
right.
So he did bring up, maybe if someone can just sort of flesh out what he is talking about there, because he does bring up like the 18th 19th century rationalists, right? So someone maybe just give a quick summary about what happened in the 18th 19th century critical scholarship and who the rationalists were and what they were doing.
Well, I think this is the perennial issue of no examples being provided.
That's fair.
There are a few different things that could be in view here. It could be the archaeologists who are skeptics. None of these places actually existed. That isn't always true. They made these claims, but if somebody has any idea of a specific that he's talking about, I'd like to hear about it because I don't know what he's talking about.
So I wondered if he had like Reimarus in mind there, who was trying to find all these naturalistic explanations for like Jesus's miracles. Like they weren't actually, it wasn't actually walking on the water. He was on like a sandbar in the middle of. That's kind of what I wondered if he was getting at. But like we have all these silly explanations that nobody actually.
Well, I think even apologists will appeal to those from time to time. They'll be like, "Oh, there was a lot of wind that blew back the Dead Sea, and that's what allowed the." So yeah, I don't know.
I just think it would blow people's minds if they were to go to like read what things like what Albright said when he's doing his making explanations about the archaeology or just reading back through these these reports and why it is that what people went and dug at Arad and Heshbon and Dibon and Jericho, like what is it that they were concluding and what were they looking for? Archaeologists were not during like the 19th and 20th centuries were not these like godless, awful atheists like some of us are. that were just out to disprove the Bible. They're out there digging with the Bible in one hand and the spade in the other. It's what they're doing, right? So it's just it just became untenable as city after city, for example, did not reflect Joshua's conquest narrative. That they went, maybe we got to think about this differently.
Awkward. All right, I think we're actually finally getting to the New Testament here, which is pretty great.
Let's talk about where they say that Jesus is wrong, where they say that Jesus is actually wrong. Jesus himself was actually wrong. Here you go.
And you too, J-Man. Your book has you saying the end would happen in the 1st century.
Bull Pucky. The Bible says no such thing.
You said you had Bible verses, Satan.
Yeah, show us.
The Bible verses, Satan.
I bet the seminary guy from Princeton has them.
He just might. Dr. Allison, could you show us Bible verses where Jesus makes failed apocalyptic prophecies?
Well, one is Mark 9:1, which says, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God has come with power.
There be some.
So, sorry, I just wanted to pause, because I'm super excited. In like 2 weeks, I'm gonna be on a stream, over on Myth Vision with Dr. Dale Allison. So I'm pretty excited about that. I know this is old hat for you, Jen. You and Dale Allison probably like hang out all the time and everything, but it's fun for me.
Yeah. Was I supposed to comment on that? I don't.
That was it.
We've never actually met.
Just a
and
What's that?
We've never actually met. He and I, and
No, really?
no, really, yeah.
Oh wow.
And
okay.
it's funny because I haven't read much of his scholarship just because it hasn't been in my purview, but what I was focusing on, and I just have one anecdote of Newer Testament scholars kind of arguing about the arsenokoites, this, how do we translate this term that ends up being translated as homosexuals, and that he and my buddy disagree, and so I haven't looked into all of that, and it's okay. And I'm like, yeah, this is the thing. We all have different thoughts about these texts, what they meant at the time. We have very little to compare it all with, and that's all I have on Dale Allison. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just open because I know he's doing important stuff, but it also makes me a little nervous that he's at Princeton, and I'm like, wait, is he still there? Yeah. Anyway, I'm like, yeah, probably gonna not agree with him on everything. So there you have it.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go.
God, come with power. Ooh, and what happened next?
As would become something of a pattern for Christian people going forward, nothing happened.
Nothing happened. That's how it ends. So this idea, though, that Jesus, guess what? This is not new. This is, again, standard argument. They're right about that. But standard argument doesn't mean uncontroversial, totally agreed on by everybody, and Christians who are even scholars have no pushback against it. Let's look at the verse that they quoted, Mark 9:1. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here, some, okay, not all, some, who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power. Interestingly, the idea is they're still going to die, whereas in the final kingdom, nobody's dying. So what is this talking about? I don't know. What happened next, they said? They said nothing happened. The scholar that they had says nothing happened. Well, verse 2, next thing that happened, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them, so some of those standing there, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. So it was something supernatural about his appearance. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. What is this? Is this like maybe, I don't know, the kingdom of God coming with power, with Elijah and Moses talking to Jesus in a glorified state?
Is it, Mike?
Is it?
That's what they were expecting, right? There it is. Kingdom, guys. Everything's good now.
Here, guys.
It's come with power.
Right.
Well,
So,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
Jen.
No.
I was just gonna say I don't have a whole lot to say back to all his New Testament things, because I'm like, right, because you're starting with these premises and these ways of reading that I just don't agree with. And so and it's interesting too, because I found myself kind of getting pulled back into that way of thinking a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how powerful this can be, Paul and all the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah. So if let's posit that a Jewish man named Jesus in the 1st century made that comment about the coming of the kingdom of heaven or coming with the kingdom of God, what did he mean by that? Right. And I think I understand that differently than Mike Winger does. And so that is where I'm going to start. And we're going to have a very different way of handling the fact that maybe the synoptics pair these two stories together. Right. That writing of that gospel comes a couple decades after of having this tradition that Paul has started. You know, like I go back to Christian origins. I go back to what are these texts doing? You know, they're coming out of a reaction to Paul's ideas. The gospels are written after all these ideas come along. And so they're reinterpreting these concepts, such as the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God. If a Jewish man named Jesus made that reference, I don't think he had a spiritual thing in mind. I think he had a very real, tangible kingdom, overthrowing Rome, having something to do with taking care of the people at that point in time. And that would look like getting Rome off their backs, I think. And it would look like getting the corrupt in their minds, right? And I would probably, I mean, as far as I know, right, corrupt leadership who are in collusion with Rome out of leadership and replacing them with more righteous Jewish leadership. Like, I think it's a kingdom, not spirit. And the spiritual reinterpretation of the whole message. Thank you, Paul. Right. So that's my response to that.
Excellent.
Happy for you, Mike.
Like,
and you can look at this is the first verse of chapter 9, but you can look at the last verse of chapter 8, the verse right before, and it talks about the Son of Man being ashamed of these people when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Like, it's clearly the same reference. And you can go to the Olivet discourse in chapter 13, where he again says, this generation shall not pass away until all this come to pass. And what are they talking about there? That's like explicitly the second coming. The stars fall from the sky, the sun goes black, the moon turns to blood. God comes in the clouds of power and great glory with the Son of Man, and everything is coming to an end. It's very clearly referring to the second coming in Mark 9:1. This is pretty pedestrian apologetics here, trying to say, no, it's the transfiguration. That's what it really means.
And he pulls up 2 Peter. Like, I think maybe we can just skip to the last one after this, but like he pulls up that passage from 2 Peter, right?
Yeah.
Which is obviously, like, if you know anything about the dating of the literature and what's going on in the church leading up to this is obviously exactly playing into what Jen was talking about, right? It's a re-spiritualization or a spiritualization of the message. So of course they're gonna start pushing different ideas about what Jesus meant when he said that you will see the kingdom of God coming in power, because it didn't come in power.
They were like starting to think Jesus is not coming right away. We need to rethink. We should rethink some of these things.
Yeah, this is standard for apocalyptic literature, right? I mean,
yes.
This is why Second Esdras can look back and say, "Oh man, the fourth kingdom was supposed to be Greece when Daniel went." But you know what? God didn't really reveal it completely to Daniel. He thought it was Greece, but it's actually Rome. Guys, this is the nature of apocalyptic literature. This is how it works, right? So I don't think we should be surprised at this. And honestly, I think a better interpretive model would be to do something like Stephen Cook up at Virginia Theological Seminary when he talks about apocalypticism as an Anglican, right? Like he explains, he embraces the nature of the genre. And just as this is how God works through apocalypticism. There are other ways to do this besides fundamentalism, guys. There are other ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I just think it's great that Mike here actually admits that his theology is that the kingdom of God came not with Jesus's resurrection or crucifixion, but with the transfiguration. And I think that's just like, I don't know off the top of my head which heresy this is, but it's definitely a heresy, because he has just completely removed the resurrection from the equation there. So I like it.
It's good. All right, let's look at this last bit here where he talks about the empty tomb.
Oh boy, brace yourself.
Now let's talk about the empty tomb.
Brace yourself.
This is super interesting, because this is where the video goes off the rails in a sense. Satan's Guide to the Bible purports to be what all scholars know and pastors all know it, and then they do this empty tomb nonsense. The majority of scholars would disagree with the implication of this video that the empty tomb is not historical. Now Bart Ehrman thinks it's not historical, a view he took on at some point in his career later on, not earlier on, after he was doing debates. And it seems to me that the empty tomb was a powerful debate point that his enemies would bring, his enemies in the debate, right? His opponents in the debate would bring, saying, hey, evidence for the resurrection, the empty tomb is an important one. And then he later said, I don't believe that anymore. Well, most scholars do believe it nowadays. So that's right. Most scholars do. You wouldn't know it from this video, though. Here you go.
Jesus' tomb is empty. His body vanished.
The earliest discussion we have of the resurrection is provided by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. His argument is striking since he makes no mention of an empty tomb.
Paul never mentions, not once, the empty tomb.
Should I expect Paul to mention it to think that he believed in it? Next thought. If Paul believed in the empty tomb or didn't believe in the empty tomb, is that weighing into the historicity of the empty tomb? Go back like 40 years. The majority of scholars were totally against the empty tomb. It was laughable if you try to make a case for the empty tomb. Scholarship has moved in a very different direction nowadays, where the majority of scholars, even non-believers and skeptics and atheists and things like that, do believe the empty tomb is a reality. Jesus did rise, and then the tomb was later found empty by women. Who was that did the tomb stuff? She's over at
That's it, right, guys?
Magnus.
All the scholars now believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
Well, in the 1980s, scholars all said the empty tomb was not historical.
Right.
What scholars are these?
Again, could I see some examples?
Yeah. Here I think there is a bit of a point to be made. I'm almost done getting a large scale survey of biblical scholars ready to go that will ask.
Can't wait.
I've got dozens and dozens of questions about all kinds of different research questions, and I want to hear. I want to be able to say, well, we know exactly what percentage of scholars think this. And I think this is obviously based on the minimal facts theory that
I think so.
Yeah, that we just had the book on the resurrection come out, but by Habermas, right?
Yep.
And so
the first of 5.
Yeah. What?
Serious? I'm not kidding.
Okay. It seems to me that most of the scholars that I've talked to agree that they found an empty tomb. Now that does not mean they agree that Jesus resurrected, but they agree on that. I have suspended judgment. I don't know that we can say one way or another. I'm interested in what scholars think about this, so it's going to be on that survey. But I think this is where Mike had the best point to make, but just trampled all over the point to insist to come up with these claims about, back in the 80s, nobody thought this was true. Now everybody thinks it's true, and that means Jesus resurrected.
Yeah. So I think Josh, you need to run, don't you? So sadly,
sorry, Megan
Josh
just texted and said that she's feeling sick, and
oh dear.
And apparently,
it's not because Mike rang the doorbell and wants to throw down.
I was going to say I hope she recovers in time for her cage match with Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all rest assured that Mike wouldn't dare step into the ring with her. He's got way too much to lose. So
I would hope not.
But guys, thank you.
On her because of her association with Bart. Is that why he's doing that?
It's hard to know why Mike would say some of the things that he says.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But
All right. Take care, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
See you around.
See ya.
Okay. Well, should we finish this and then get to some super chats?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
So, oops, that tab. Thank you.
Airman's University too, same school. They found tombs that match the description of the tombs from the Bible, and they're just in the Jerusalem area. They're not farther away. You don't have these tombs in, say, Rome, where some people will suggest some of the Gospels were written. The Sanhedrin and their role in burying and taking care of those who had died in Jerusalem around Passover time, the desire to get them buried and taken care of, the function of the tomb, Joseph of Arimathea, his role in the Sanhedrin. There's a bunch of interconnecting pieces that speak of the historicity of it. 1 Corinthians 15. I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures, that he appeared to Cephas, Peter, and to the 12, and he appeared to more than 500 brothers at once, and It's silly to think that this is evidence Paul didn't know about the tomb. He died, he was buried, he rose. Does burial require a tomb? No, it could require just a hole in the ground. But is it consistent with the tomb? Yes. Do we also have very early accounts of the tomb? Yes. Do we have any conflicting accounts? No. Normal history, you would just assume Paul's talking about the empty tomb here. But skeptical, propaganda, you're going to be like, no, I'm going to make it so hard for you to prove any element of your Christian faith that I will fight you tooth and nail every step of the way. That I think is what's happening
key,
here.
Right? proving
That's
elements of your
key.
Christian faith is what he's
Yes.
saying there, and not talking about what the texts are saying or not saying. And
Yep.
yeah.
I think the point that JJ was making there was that if the empty tomb became a standard, a rally cry for early Christians, we would expect it to be found there.
Yeah.
It's not like this is just some kind of historical incident. Like the empty tomb is how the Gospel of Mark ends. The empty tomb becomes, I mean, that's one of Habermas's points, the empty tomb. But either it had not taken on that social significance by the 50s CE when Paul was writing, or it was generated after that time period.
Right.
And so in reconstructing how these things develop and are transmitted and are represented in the literature and in the traditions, that's not an inappropriate question to ask. That is not a problematic observation that
Very much.
the empty tomb becomes significant. It is not significant in 1 Corinthians 15 when Paul tries to say, here are the significant things.
Right.
And so that is, I would suggest that is evidence that maybe this is something that was developed, that was innovated later.
And also on that, and somewhat tangential, but I think it's relevant to the conversation, which is that passage in 1 Corinthians when he keeps saying according to the scriptures, those steps that Paul established, drawing from the scriptures, are not steps that any other Jewish writers were making. They weren't connections people were writing prior to Paul. He creates these bizarre, really interesting connections. And so his use of according to the scriptures, okay, it's really creative and it's not a logical thing. But if you don't know that, if you don't know that Paul isn't following the way Jews have been reading and expecting things to happen for centuries, then it sounds pretty impressive. Like, wow, this is in there. It's in there. But it's not clear. In fact, one of my seminary professors, had to sit down with me and be like, yeah, no, that's what I worked on my doctorate is how did Paul make these connections? Like, where did he get them to begin with? Now we can see it, but how did they get there? First of all,
Nice.
I hope I'm making sense, but
no, totally.
I wanted to point out too, like what we understand about literature in general, and this is my reception history kind of thinking coming into play, is that like when you don't have a trope, and then suddenly a trope appears, and then that trope becomes elaborated on and becomes almost fan fictioned into more and more contexts.
Right.
Like that is okay. It's negative evidence, but it's also is a very strong evidence for when that trope becomes popular. And so I don't think in terms of what's like historically real or accurate or not with these things, but we can see in the literature that it is the Gospel of Mark that seems to be the beginning of the trope, and it is a very interesting phenomenon that gets picked up on, that becomes elaborated on in the other Gospels and then in the early Christian literature, and then it becomes an issue that has to be discussed of whether or not it could be historically true. Right. And so you get these apologetics and the anti-apologetics, and we get all that stuff going on in the 2nd century because there's the question of, hey, is this significant for the faith or not? And so like from my perspective, it's this shows up at Mark and becomes interesting only then.
Yeah. And
exactly.
Thank you. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Is it apologia or apologia?
It's apologia.
Apologia. Okay, thank you for the correction.
Wow.
I was totally wrong about Habermas, and I apologize for that. I pulled up an article real quick.
It's an easy mistake to make, though, because he used to include it.
Well, he says in this...
as one of his minimal facts.
I think he had like a broader and a narrower set of facts, but
something like that.
He says in this 2012 article in Southeastern Theological Review, I've never counted the empty tomb as a minimal fact. He does talk about how it's something he talks about, but his polling says that between 2/3 and 3/4 of scholars accept the historicity of the empty tomb. And for him, that was not enough to consider it one of the minimal facts. So I was wrong about that, and thank you for apologia. For
It
pointing that
happens. Sometimes Dan is wrong, guys.
And now we're going to start calling him apologia.
And nothing he says is right or true. Yeah.
So nothing.
Everything is wrong.
Nothing makes apologia.
Can't
feel
trust
worse,
him for
especially
anything.
when people mispronounce it apologia. I wanted to help Mike out a little bit here. He mentions the fine work of Jody Magnus.
He does
on burial customs. In fact, she's published widely on this. Like this is a good book here that she has written, where she talks about this among a number of other elements of Jewish daily life in the Second Temple period. And the way this works, the way the argument goes here, is that Jody argues quite strongly for the plausibility of this idea that after Jesus was crucified, because of the High Holy Day, his body was removed and put into a tomb temporarily, right? This is the argument. So she's basically saying, yeah, the Gospels, like, this isn't a crazy idea that Jesus was actually put into a wealthy man's tomb. And she stops there, right? Like, importantly, this is what she's a scholar. She's an archaeologist. This is what we do. You follow the evidence and you make a point. Importantly, Jody also, unfortunately, has to clarify in her book, guys, I'm not saying I think Jesus rose from the dead here. Do we have anything more, or should we get to questions?
Let's hit some questions.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, we have and I'm just going to turn this over to Dapper Dinosaur here, but I wanted to point out that we've got 700 people watching this stream. I've never had this many people watching my channel at the same time. I don't know about you guys, but this is pretty incredible.
It's really fun.
All right.
Why are you laughing, Matt?
I just have never had anyone watch a live stream.
Oh.
So it's
I just need the clarification. Yep.
I'm just thinking
I think I've had 35 or 36 at one point.
I'm very impressed. This is great.
Yeah.
What do you got for us, Dinosaur?
All right, so we have a whole bunch of things. I have started a few things that I thought were interesting that weren't super chatted. But first up, we have Heathen Queen for $4.99 US saying, no question, I'm deep in the book stacks here in Chicago. Just wanted to say Winger is the worst. Keep up the good work, friends.
You keep up the good work, Heathen Queen.
Heathen Queen.
Good luck in the next semester. Yeah. Get that bread.
All right. Jay Pasek, I'm going to go with. If that's not how you say your name, I'm very sorry. How many times has this panel criticized Mike Winger? I'm thinking this isn't the first time.
It's the second time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's part 2.
Yeah.
Of 2.
Of 2. Yeah.
Of 2. This is it.
Yes. Yeah. At least for that part of that.
I mean, I guess until Mike says something else stupid, right?
Okay, so it's part 2 of Infinity is what you're telling me.
We can't cover them all.
Ichabod for $10 says, just saying hey with a wave emoji and showing some love. Dr. Kill, Matt, Dan, would love to have you on for an interview.
Just to clarify, I just interviewed with him, so he wasn't leaving me out.
Okay. I assumed that
I had a really lovely conversation with him. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see. Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger for $2 says, one day I will, quote, fix Josh's use of layers with an eye rolly emoji.
So
archaeologist in the house.
There you go.
Let's see. Constellation Pegasus for $19.99 says, anyone here read the Rashi commentary on Leviathan in Genesis, originally a male-female pair, which God had to kill the female, if not the earth couldn't exist? Never read anybody bring this up before.
Wow, that sounds... I haven't. I've read very, very little Rashi. I don't know about you guys, but that sounds amazing.
I have glanced off of this at one point or another. This interpretation is interesting, but I think most scholars don't find that it will have much much value for reconstructing the tradition as it existed prior to the medieval period. So, so that's probably in rabbinics. You probably can find some people talking about this a little more, but not in my field.
Yeah,
just
I mean,
just so people are
there. Yeah.
I was going to say, so people are clear here. When it comes to doing a lot of the history of the textual scholarship, the rabbinic literature, whilst intensely interesting, is usually just way too late to provide much useful insight into how the text developed and the ideas behind them.
There are some exceptions, though, but for the most part, people working in early Israelite religion and Second Temple Judaism, even in early Christianity, the rabbinics are going to be, and particularly medieval authors, are going to be of limited value.
All right, Ronan of Stag for $5 Canadian says, "Hello, everyone, and Sláinte for anyone who celebrates." Because it is, in fact, St. Patrick's Day, if you are someone who celebrates. Nice. And yeah, I'm going with Sláinte and not the actual Irish pronunciation because I don't know how to pharyngealize all of those sounds effectively, so I'm not going to try.
Not even you? Oh my, wow.
I mean, look, I could try, but like, there's also a lot of palatalization, and I'm just like, I don't want to have my first attempt at this be live on air in front of 700 people. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lewinter for $2 says, Winger reminds me of Ned Flanders meets Dane Cook with a question mark, even though I think that's just a statement.
Hey, I'll go with it. I think it works.
Somebody's gonna have to do a mashup cartoon.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right, Myth Vision Podcast for $5 in the US says, serious question. How much of actual scholarship do you think Mike Winger actually knows? Do we think he's even aware of the scholarship?
Yeah.
That is a good question.
He has a master's degree, doesn't he?
No, he's got as near as I can tell, he's got he went to like a Cornerstone Church college.
Okay.
Like it's not as far as I can tell, based on what I've read on his page about his qualifications. He did like
an undergrad,
some years of something like that. Yeah, okay. But I don't even think at like a properly accredited school.
Yeah.
So it's entirely possible that he just has no idea.
And also, even in accredited programs, frequently on the seminary side of things, or even conservative universities, you're going to be trained in your position on these things, and so they're only going to selectively let critical scholarship in, along with how to combat it, for the most part. And so there are folks who will talk a good game as if they've been fully exposed to all the critical scholarship, but it will be wildly outdated stuff. It will be apologetic stuff, and they will only know the critical scholarship through the lens of being basically spoon-fed bits and pieces of
happening.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his. I mean, I know you all have seen this, but he graduated from the School of Ministry at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and was ordained in 2006. And I haven't, looked up Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
But just the name itself is not giving me any kind of,
not a lot of confidence there.
Yeah,
right?
that's the word language I was looking for. Yep.
Yeah, you could almost call him an autodidact.
Yeah. Yep.
Or inspired by the Holy Spirit.
That's even better, right?
Option. PI says, I mean, you guys just hide the truth, the other side of scholarship. You just want to sin, but temperature in hell is rising.
Yeah, because there's so many good people down there.
It's rising on Earth too, so hey, we're all out of luck.
Actually,
I'm really hoping that's not a typo and he meant to type schoolership.
Yeah.
There's a famous saying from Brigham Young, from my own tradition. One of the least offensive things he said, where he said, if the Mormons end up in hell, we'll turn the devils out and make a heaven of it. which
I
is
like
a
that idea.
sentiment that
That sounds
that I
great.
kind of like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like that country song that if you're going through hell, keep on going.
Oh,
Yes.
you
Yes.
might get out before the devil even knows you're there.
That's right. Thank you, Dan.
I have no idea.
Full disclosure, I was born into a family of bluegrass musicians and was raised on bluegrass and old country. So I know some rebel bluegrass songs by heart still. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
I will accept no mockery of
that's the
of
Lord's
country.
music.
Yeah,
No,
it is.
me neither. I'm dead serious. I don't even pretend to hide it. When I was on Deep Drakes, David asked me what my favorite death metal song was or something. I was like, I don't know. I listened to country, and he almost died.
Country has been problematic for a while now, but when I was younger, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right. Ravilla178 for $5 Canadian says, could you elaborate on, quote, mourning her virginity, unquote? She didn't lose it. What, I think that's does, not dies. The Hebrew say exactly.
Well, I'm looking at, I have the Hebrew up, but I'm looking at the English translations. So it's a couple different places. So in verse 37, Judges 11, verse 37, she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Grant me 2 months so that I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my companions and I. And then verse 38, go, he said, and he sent her away for 2 months. So she departed, she and her companions, and bewailed her virginity on the mountains.
Well, and I think it's good to point out the preposition there is al. So I think bewail or weep regarding or about my virginity is the way to go.
Yeah, and didn't look at the Hebrews directly yet. Did you have comments about that, Dan, that I haven't?
Yeah, the verbal root there is bacha, which just means to cry, to weep.
Mhm.
And then you have al betulai. So
Right.
and that's the abstract concept of virginity with the first common singular possessive pronoun.
So to me, that just means she's going to die without having served her purpose in this way to a man, right? She's dying as a virgin. And to me, that is so much more intense than just she's not going to have children and she's not, but it's her purpose in life is to serve a man in this way, and she's not going to get to do it.
Yeah, so she's mourning because she's a virgin and going to stay that way.
She's going to die this way, in this state, yes. And the thing that's being mourned is not, oh, I won't have children, as Mike says. The thing that's being mourned is she's not going to serve her purpose in this way, which is one of the main messages we get in the Hebrew Bible is women are here for men's purposes, to give them, for them to have sex, to give them children.
So it's almost like we could say that the author was a man who is mourning that this virgin is going to get sacrificed.
Yep.
All right, Claude Simeon for $5 says, thank you for using begging the question correctly, even though as a philosopher/scholar, it's kind of cheating. So
I'm not touching that one.
Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger for $2 says, it was a cosmic do-over, Dan.
Oh, I remember when I saw that when it came up, and it was, I'm trying to remember what
What were we talking about?
Yeah, I remember, but I don't remember.
Oh, that maybe that's the
it was, I do remember.
Human
it was
sacrifice.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. Because in some later passages, it's like, no, don't do the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Redeem your firstborn sons. Yeah. Back to PI. Like, these people are, well, that's a weird phrasing. Like, these people are clearly don't want to even hear about the religious scholar academia, the other side. They just want to sit and read secular scholarship. Why do you guys at least don't answer this? So could you guys at least not answer this?
Well, I am a religious person myself. I was going to be I'd let everybody know I was probably going to be late because I had some service things to take care of at my
Dan goes
my
to
congregation.
church, guys.
But then I was told I wasn't needed today, so I showed up on time. And I read religious scholarship, and I am friends with religious scholars. And so, yeah, this is there's nothing wrong with critical scholarship, and you'd be surprised how many critical scholars are believers themselves.
Yes.
So many.
So many.
Most of them. I mean, really,
Right.
most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah,
like
it's-
I mean, that's how we get into this, right?
Yeah, I'm so confused by this comment.
Yeah,
like
me too.
it's not it's obviously has no understanding of the field that we're in.
Right. Just
I
like
think
Mike.
people like to just assume,
Mike.
just make up what they think the field is like, and they're going to make it up in a way that serves their presuppositions and their interests and protects their self-image. And if that means suggesting that critical scholars are all ungodly sinners and religious scholars are all saints, that's what they're going to make up, and then they're going to just assert it as if it were fact without bothering to go get any experience with it. Come to SBL.
I was just gonna say that, like, dude, just drop into one of these sessions.
Register for
in
SBL.
his neighborhood. He's in Southern California. He could just
it's
drop in.
San Diego. Just swing by. You don't even need to register if you don't go onto the vendor floor, and just go see how many people in religious garb you see walking around. And see how many people. Go talk to people and ask how many of them are religious. And this is the ungodly guild of biblical scholars that ETS glares down their snout at. So yeah, it's.
If it makes y'all feel better, I also watch people do the same thing to all sorts of other fields of academia. Like I see them routinely do it to biology, geology, physics, astronomy. So it's not just this that we have someone show up and be like, well, these are just the godless, heathen, atheist biologists. Happens all over the place.
It feels like this has just become a general feeling among some towards scholarship.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is, right?
Revelo 178 for $5 Canadian says, "Could you elaborate?"
You saw that one already.
I went up instead of down. That was the problem. Milwaukee Atheist for $5. Also, FYI, Kip has an I'll read you the intonation there. Also, FYI, Kip has an unreleased fanfic about the steamy relationship between David and Jonathan. Hot stuff.
Do you really?
That's no, I actually do not. So this is my friend Lawrence trying very hard to get me into trouble and misspelling Jonathan in the process.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jonathan.
Maybe I don't know. It's a good idea. Maybe I should do that.
This version of Jonathan is just a neuter noun in Greek. That's what's happening.
Oh,
right
thank
there.
you.
Okay,
Oh, that's academic humor. Good job.
Thank you.
This is a good
Dark
point.
Circle.
Like
Dark Circles 22 for $10. Pointed out the inherent sexism in Isaac being rescued from sacrifice while Jephthah's daughter isn't. To my fundamentalist dad, he verbally agreed, then just shrugged it off as unimportant.
Wow.
Well, it's a paradigm destroying thing to recognize, and so if you're not going to try to work your way around it, you're just going to ignore it.
Yep.
Carrie Bronson for $5. How does the line to non-parents go? It's different when it's your own kid.
That's about child sacrifice as well,
Oh, yeah.
specifically
God.
pre-gaming for God's own sacrifice of his own child.
There you go.
Nice. Nitty for $9.99 US says, "What Sean McDowell told me he was an adult."
Jesus was an adult, not a child.
So
Yeah.
what?
Oh yes.
Sean McDowell
Isaac.
told me he
Yeah.
was an adult. Yeah.
This was apparently something I tackled in the video that I made about it. These other apologists made a big deal about the fact that Jesus wasn't a child; he was a full-grown man.
Well,
When,
so was
when he
Isaac.
went to the
but that's-
cross.
Isn't
But isn't this teenager?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the
Makes it
point is
okay
that
or different. I don't know.
So human sacrifice is okay if it's only left to adults. Is the message
right,
I'm
but,
getting here.
but this is a point that in some interpretations Isaac is also seen as an adult.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that's one of those important things here is I think that's what's coming into play is that there's more parallels. It's not just baby Isaac being laid there helplessly, but that Isaac is this prefiguration of Jesus because he's submissive and he's making the sacrifice as well. Like, so I think that's where they do it. And that's the play in Hebrews as well, isn't it?
Yes.
I think,
yes.
yeah. So
I think it's worthwhile pointing out. I think it's worthwhile pointing out here too. Speaking about the rabbis, when they approached this story about Isaac, there were a few of them who actually said, "Yeah, this happened.
Mhm.
Isaac died,
Mhm.
and he was resurrected."
Mhm. Yep. And that the Islamic tradition takes that up as Ishmael was, but he was actually killed and was resurrected. Yeah. Thank you, Nitty, for the comment. Question.
Yeah.
All right. From Kath for $4.99 US says, "Sorry, Mike, but a ministry degree from Calvary Chapel does not make you a biblical scholar."
Yes, that's...
Does the YouTube channel?
I was going to say, just like a history degree doesn't make me a linguist. So take that.
Fair enough.
Boom.
Dorothy say, "God didn't kill his own son. Can you guys grow the F up? Human beings killed the son of God who was delivered up. Do any of you even read Young?" Which is
I
not
certainly
voluntarily.
don't read Young.
Yeah.
Show of hands for Young readers, everybody. No,
I
No?
mean,
Okay.
I've done
I guess
it.
the answer is no. Oh, okay.
Not recreationally.
Not recreationally, no, but educationally, it was a hoop I jumped through.
It was a long time ago.
But yeah.
All right. Edward Izanu, I'm going to go with, sorry about that, for 25 of a currency with which I am not familiar, says, "Is the seven-headed dragon in Revelation actually Leviathan, or maybe a symbol of Rome which had 7 hills?"
It is. I would argue that the imagery there is supposed to reflect both, because what we have in Revelation 12:9, and there's going to be another question upcoming saying Revelation 12:17, doesn't that refer to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, or could it refer to the serpent in the Garden of Eden? And I would argue no. Revelation 12:9 refers to a serpent and a dragon, and there's only one place in all of the Greek Bible where you have these two things coming together, and that's in Isaiah 27:1, where it refers to Leviathan as that twisting serpent, that wriggling serpent, the dragon who lives in the sea, at least according to the ancient Greek translation. And Isaiah 27:1 is riffing on an earlier Ugaritic text that praises Baal for destroying Lotan, that wriggling serpent, that twisting serpent, the dragon with 7 heads. And so the idea of a seven-headed dragon is actually found in a number of different societies around the world, but I think that's being picked up in Revelation. So that ancient serpent is not the serpent in the Garden of Eden. It's Leviathan. But it conveniently can also be used as a symbol of the 7 hills of Rome.
Right. Thank you for
All
that.
right. PI sent a €225 super chat that was blank. So thank you very much.
PI.
Thanks. Yeah.
MJR Schneider for $5 says, "Is Revelation 12:17 a reference to Genesis 3:15? And if it is, isn't that a biblical connection between Satan and the serpent of Eden?"
Yeah, so that's where I think that's...
So there is the connection that is made between Satan and the serpent in Eden is actually made by Paul.
Paul, yeah.
I believe, right? Where he talks about how...
I don't know the language that he specifically uses, but
at one point he says, "You will the God of the God of peace will soon crush Satan underfoot." I've always taken as an allusion to Genesis 3:14. It's 3:14, isn't it? But I think Paul has that in mind, at least, while he's writing a lot of this. But Jen, you may have.
It's bad. I'm not up on. I don't like
Romans
language.
16:20.
That's what I was looking at. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I think there's another reference, like when he talks about the woman being deceived. There's a reference. I think. I don't like his interpretation of Genesis 3 in general. Like he's misreading. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians. Yeah. But I just as we're all like staring at our screens, and I'll just throw an anecdote out there from the Syriac Book of the Cave of Treasures, where Satan comes to the garden, and the interpreter here that's retelling the story of this snake at the Garden of Eden just is reflecting on how this could happen, that the snake could actually speak to Eve, and says, well, how would a snake even talk? And he says, and it's just like when you have a bird and you teach it to speak Greek, You hold a mirror up in front of the bird and you stand behind it speaking to it in Greek. And the bird will look at you and see his mate and think that his mate is speaking to him and will repeat the words. And then he will speak Greek.
That's amazing.
As someone
That's
who
how
knows
you-
a thing or two about birds and anatomy and snakes, I'm just going to point out birds have a syrinx, which is what allows certain species of bird to pronounce things that sound like human speech. Snakes don't even really have vocal cords. So even if that is how you got a bird to speak, it wouldn't work for a snake because they literally can't make the kinds of sounds that humans would recognize as speech. It cannot be produced by a snake. That's why some snakes have done things like evolved rattles, because they can't hiss at you or scream at you. So they have to use some other part of their anatomy to make a noise to warn you, hey, you're getting close. I would rather not have to bite you and waste precious venom, but I totally will.
So if a snake talks in the forest, does anybody hear him? Sorry.
I'm trying to see how Romans 16:20 connects with Genesis 3, but the Greek there actually didn't say crush your head. It's
Doesn't it?
Tereo. It says to guard or watch or keep.
Oh wow!
And so
I got to go back and look at that. Thanks.
Well, maybe there's another there's a variation on that Septuagint passage that Paul is talking about. I don't know.
And Stevens for £5 just sends a thumbs up, which reminds me, if you have not hit like on this live stream, please do that. It does help get this into the algorithm.
Smash that like button.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Smash.
As the kids are saying.
Indeed.
That's how they say it.
The Brojo Show, Gen X the BS, for $5 says, the Christian's God is the Bible, and apparently the all-knowing can't go outside its binder.
Well, not all of them, but I think there's certainly some for whom God is the Bible.
Yeah, it's very equated.
And as much as people like Mike Winger would absolutely deny that, I think the label fits.
I certainly thought of it that way without being conscious of it, but just put those on the same, his language demonstrated that. And I used to think like that, right? That reading the Bible is like reading the words of God.
God says.
Without realizing what that premise was saying. I saw it on the same level as God, essentially. Interacted with it that way. So, yeah.
Supreme Scientist for $10 says, according to the Bible, God confused the languages after the Tower of, I think you mean Babel incident, not Bible incident. Why is it now our fault that we have to struggle to find the quote original meaning of its words?
It's just part of the curse, right?
Yeah.
God messed that one up too. Bad decision.
Actually, we just talked about the Tower of Babel on our show on my channel, didn't we? Yeah,
we did. I have a video about that as well.
There was a woman who was claiming that Hebrew was the original language, and all the languages other than Hebrew were made at the Tower of Babel.
And the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and this was wild. The Egyptian hieroglyphs were all developed from those 22 proto-alphabetic characters that became Hebrew. It was something.
It was very backwards.
Wow.
Yes.
When you have
David
a language, you can find it, huh? You can read it.
David Aquarius for $20 says, I've been dying to ask this question. If you had to create a spiritual worldview that's consistent with your scholarship, what would that look like? Is there an existing religion that even comes close? Love you all. Heart emoji.
Well, I think I'm a little I'm not entirely sure what a spiritual, like, does he mean like a religious worldview?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, accepting some sort of spiritual or religious experience, I guess.
Framework.
Sets of
I don't know.
and ideas.
I mean, I did it for years, and
made your own religion.
What? Sorry, what?
Did you make your own religion?
No, not that. But I maybe I think on some level we all sort of conceptualize this to make it work for ourselves, right? Like for years, while I was still a confessing Christian, I organized my own worldview in such a way where I could accommodate my critical scholarship while I attended an evangelical church. There's strategies to do it, right? Like it's.
I mean, I can say, for instance, I find some of the basic ideas within Buddhist framework I find really helpful because I think those, acknowledging that acknowledging the way and why suffering happens, and having a framework for how to process that and manage it moving forward. I mean, that's my language. That isn't Buddhist language, but that's what they're getting at often with the Four Noble Truths and then the Noble Eightfold Path, right? So, there's some ideas about how the world works there that I find really helpful. And then I move on to other things that I've learned along the way. So it would be very, science and human studies friendly, and like how do things around morals and ethics and things like that I've picked up along the way from various perspectives. So I don't know, but that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Well, I do have a religion that I would support. It would be apollo-Dionysianism, which would be it's called drinking wine in the sun.
And that definitely underscores your scholarship. Yeah.
My scholarship would consider that a pure reception of the great myths of so.
And this is really out of bounds for my social media participation, but I'll just say that in the period of my most acute kind of spirituality, to speak of spirituality apart from like religious participation, I would have said that whoever was born of the union of Dave Matthews and Jewel would be my Messiah. So you can probably date that period in my life pretty accurately just based on that. So
nice. So good.
Dr. Clark Van Gilder says for $4.99 US, what's the pay-per-view fee for the Winger v. Lewis fight tonight? Or sorry, fight night. There we go. Take my money now.
Yeah, mine too. That's Megan Lewis, not Lennox Lewis.
Yes. Supreme Scientist for $2 says, how confident can we be about what Jesus said?
Not incredibly.
Very.
This is something that I talked with Helen Bond about on our Data Over Dogma podcast.
That was a great episode, by the way.
I thought she did wonderfully. And she commented, we can get kind of the gist of the worldview, but in terms of actual words spoken, there's no way to be confident about anything in there.
All right. TX Scientist for $9.99 US says, I was indoctrinated in Church of Christ as a kid, and they said the kingdom coming was Acts 2 and Pentecost. A reinterpretation there. Keep up the great work.
Nice. I think Acts 2 would have said that they were fulfilling Joel, not
they were. I mean, they're pretty explicit about that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
But I agree that Pentecostal churches would be telling people, so like the Church of Christ would be telling people that the kingdom actually comes in Acts 2 and not with the crucifixion or resurrection, because that is a super normal Pentecostal way of interpreting things. So in those Pentecostal churches like the Church of Christ, they would, that I can see. So I think that's actually really cool to see that that way of interpreting it, that we're just like, you pick the spot where you like your theology the most and say, well, this is where it actually happens.
All right. Now this is a bit of a two-parter. Lord Dissident says Jesus didn't exist, he was a myth, and then also follows it up with, neither did Moses or Muhammad, and I'm not used to having Muhammad mythicism bandied about. That's a relatively new one for me.
New to me too.
I think David Fitzgerald is starting to flirt with that idea. I won't be surprised if none of you know who David Fitzgerald is, but
I actually do know who he is. Yeah.
Oh,
he asked me to blurb one of his books or something, and I just
really did you?
I didn't have time to. I like the guy, what I know, but I just couldn't muster enough attention to feel comfortable. Anyway. Sorry. Anyway, yes, back to what you're saying is more important. David,
So
is that
maybe we should do a poll.
Is David saying that about Muhammad? That there's no actual
in some of his he says he's writing a book about how virtually all the religious figures, like all the religious founders from Buddha to Moses to Jesus to Muhammad, they're all just
Dave
fictional.
Matthews and Jewel.
Yeah. They're all just
them
fictional.
too.
They're entirely
I'm personally a well-known Bob skeptic, and I know we have photographs of the Bob, but I don't care. I'm still a Bob mythicist. No, in case anyone knows what Bobism is, which no one does anymore.
Oh, I thought you were referring to the from Baha'i. I thought you were...
Well, so the Bob actually is the predecessor of Baha'u'llah. The Baha'u'llah was a Bobist.
I thought you were.
So I'm going one step back, and I was saying the Bob didn't exist. Baha'u'llah, no, he's great. The Bob, no.
Okay.
EC Mix, Friday evening to Sunday morning is in no way 3 days. Charitably, it's 2 days, but more accurately, a day and a half. Can someone explain this?
It's just on the third day. So Friday is day 1, Saturday is day 2 on the third day.
There is the conflict with the sign of Jonah, however, where it says, as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And that is totally inaccurate.
Right.
But yeah, if I flew on a plane to to California on a Friday and then came back on a Sunday, and then my boss asked me why I was late to work, it'd be like, oh, I've been in California for 3 days. Like it's you just speak in kind of generalities when you talk about that kind of thing. It's not required to be 72 hours on the dot.
All right, Heng Fashi for $20 says an omni being needing any being to be killed to propitiate. It is really fracked up. So
it is.
It always irked me how when I think that's Adam and Eve realize they're nude, God gives them animal skin togas. Those animals must have been like, whoa, WTF, bro?
Is that really necessary? Yeah, no, this issue of actually just sitting with processing what we're saying, that God's anger at us for being who he created us to be according to the narratives, right, is so great that his anger can only be appeased by taking the life of someone innocent and full without sin and all this stuff. It's really stunning that I didn't see that for so long, but I see it differently now than I did for when I was an evangelist.
And I think this is related to the same issue with the child sacrifice, is you are receiving this tradition and then renegotiating it.
Right.
And so the whole idea of animal sacrifice is that somebody needs this to eat, probably originally deceased ancestors, which then became deities. And so there's a perception that they need this. And then you receive that tradition. And at some point you're like, do they really need this? But it's the received tradition, and so you rationalize it in whatever way you need to. And this is this goes into ritual theory and ideas about how this is causally opaque, where we don't really know what on earth is going on here, or any relationship between what we're doing and something we hope to get on the other end, but we do it because this is what we do. And
right, but you missed a step there, Dan, because there's like it gets watered down and all that kind of stuff, and then it turns into money.
That's definitely
because you get to a point where we're like, wait a minute, why are we making them give food? Why are we burning? Wait, can't they just give us money?
Yeah, and then and this is where Josiah's reform comes in, and he's like, I kind of like everybody having to come here. Maybe we shouldn't rebuild all of the cult sites that Sennacherib destroyed. So guess what I just found in the temple? God's law.
Whoa.
So it turns out you're supposed to be bringing all your money to me. So
amazing.
Man.
The original prosperity preacher.
There you go.
Ayal Goods for 10 Canadian dollars says, this is for Dr. Bird. What are your thoughts on Song of Songs 3:11, crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day his heart rejoiced, and then also he went on to later say he messed up the Hebrew, and I'm not going to subject you to my attempts to read the Hebrew.
Okay. What? Sorry, Song of Songs 3:11?
I believe that is what
Yeah.
SOS 311 is
Yeah,
referring
yeah.
to.
He posts. He made its posts of silver, its back of gold, cedar purple. Daughters of Jerusalem, come out and look at King Solomon, at the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart. To be honest, this is not a passage I've spent any time with prior to this. So, I mean, I've read through Song of Solomon many times, but I've not stopped to sit with this. So I'm so sorry. I'll go, goes. I'm not sure what you are curious about in this verse. Do you mean in the light of this, what I'm saying about marriage in the Hebrew Bible, that there's no verb to marry? Maybe is that what you're asking? Perhaps. I'm guessing that's it. On the day of his wedding. So I haven't looked at that. It's a great question. If that's what you're getting at,
is the Hebrew word there.
Say that again.
He's got he put the text.
Yeah, I don't.
Which looks like that's a hapax. That's the only place that word occurs.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
So hapax legomenon, is that just for people who don't know what that means?
Yes.
Happens once.
But obviously it's etymologically related to the chatan.
And I would right. So I would need to look at it. I'm so sorry. I can't offer a more informed response to the question, but I appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
All right. Supreme Scientist for $2 says, Weird that God needs apologists to speak for him with a cry laugh emoji. John Y. Spinoza for $9.99 US says, Dr. D, I think that's probably Dan, I've been trying to register for upcoming Ming next Sunday and can't. Your site keeps saying page not found, tried multiple browsers, need some help.
This is something that's been happening with the platform Kajabi, and they're not being incredibly helpful. We have set up a Venmo at Didaskaloi, spelled exactly like the website. You can also contribute directly through paypal.me/MAKLELAN. Just let us know which class you're registering for. Let us and give us an email address, and we'll manually register you. So sorry, I'm apologize for that. I keep contacting Kajabi, and they're not being incredibly helpful. So we are looking for alternatives. But in the meantime, that's our workaround.
All right. Hard Work for $4.99 says they've criticized him 666 times. So there you go.
It was only 616.
I wish
the Latin Veritas, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Boring Turtle for $20 says, Hey Kip, I was recently watching a video where you were talking remnants of polytheism in certain passages, i.e. Genesis 1:26. I was wondering if we see a transition from less to more monotheism from older to newer manuscripts.
So I used to think this was probably the case, and I am seriously reconsidering a lot of that moving forward. And actually, Dan has done a fair bit more work on this kind of stuff than I have, and I was excited about the virtual conference that you guys have upcoming, but I'm now disappointed that I'm going to have to wait.
I can probably get you a Zoom link.
Oh, that'd be great if you could.
Yeah. Brown University.
Do you want to say something about this? Do you want to say something about this?
Oh, about the conference?
No, about the as I understand, as I see it, the transition from less to more monotheism from older to newer manuscripts.
Well, I am an advocate for not finding monotheism. Well, at least not imposing monotheism anywhere on the Bible. That this is a post-biblical philosophical innovation and framework, and so it harms our reading to read the Bible through the lens of monotheism. Now, you do certainly have this elevation of Adonai and the denigration of the other gods of the nations, and they get treated as they get dismissed using a variety of different rhetorical terms. and they get demoted to angelic status or demonic status or things like that. But you still have recognition of other gods from beginning to end. They're all over the Dead Sea Scrolls, even within Christianity, even within Rabbinic Judaism, there are references to the gods. And so, no, you don't see a movement at all. And I think part of the reason is that with a text like Genesis 1:26, that's so deeply embedded in the foundations of that you're just going to get some kind of interpretation that becomes normative that allows it to carry on without causing trouble. And so Christians do that by saying, "Oh, it's the Trinity," which is ridiculous. But that means okay, we have a place for that on the shelf. We'll put it up on the shelf. We don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's not a problem. And so you don't have a reason to need to change it later on down the road. And Judaism came up with its own ways to do that as well.
I can offer a better answer to that other question now, since I've had a minute. I'm not as quick on the Hebrew as my colleagues here, and I needed a minute.
You were going to be like, I can offer a better answer than Dan.
Oh, that day will never come, Dan. Just let me. I just needed a minute to take a look at. They knew what they were looking at better than I did. So, the form of the verb there, the day of in the day. So, b'yom hatunat. Right, is the form of this noun or verb, depending on which way you want to look at it. So the root there is about this the chatan. This is the reference to one person in this is being made legitimate, comparing through the act of circumcision. So the importance of circumcision in making this one member is not of the Israelites and the other is, and so there's this covering of the other to make it part of the Israelites through the reference of circumcision, and it's so that verb is one of the verbs used to talk about marriage, which I use with air quotes. And then, so this, in the day of this happening for him, he's covering his non-Israelite partner. But it's not, this is a wedding that's taking place. It's a reference to a status that people do or do not have. One of them does not have in this pairing and is being covered by the other to make this a legitimate Israelite kind of a thing. And so that, again, is an example, in my opinion, of that's a hard thing to represent briefly. Like, I'm having a hard time describing it. And so there's a shorthand being used to say in the day of his wedding. But that's not what I read in the Hebrew language there. And that's a choice they've made. And probably most English translation committees or, translation committees that come up with English are going to use that, because it's really hard to get at what the word is saying versus what it's ultimately pointing to is what we call a wedding, right? So I hope that's helpful.
Michael Apple for $10 US says, seriously, admit it. You just want to sin. Don't we all?
I just like the whole category. I don't know if they're being serious. So I just wanted to say that. Like, I just have let go of the category of sin. And I find it so harmful and harmful, unhelpful, all kinds of things. And I'm assuming Michael's being playful, but it's come up a few times. So I just want to be clear.
All right. Archival Blob, sorry, I almost said Bob, for 26 says, just wanted to say thank you all for doing this. And yes, that is Swedish kroner, I know.
Thank you, Archival Blob.
All right. Foo Rocker for $5 says, it seems to me the empty tomb relies heavily on Joseph of Arimathea being a real figure. Do scholars agree on his existence?
I don't think so, but I'm in fact, even in that book that I showed you from Jody Magnus, she mentions just very briefly that this could be a real guy, but not necessarily. And even in the absence of an historical Joseph of Arimathea, this doesn't even really necessarily detract from the idea that an historical Jesus might have been laid in a new tomb. But
yeah, I would say that the premise of the empty tomb does not actually rely that heavily upon the idea of this guy being real. It's a tomb, right? The story has this idea, this trope, right? As Matt was talking about before, right? That it's empty, blah blah blah.
All right. Hengfa Shi for $10 US says, what do you guys think of all the Hebrew references finding their way into Arthurian legends? Urim on the hilt of Excalibur and Galuth, exile, sick name for a sword, being the name of Gawain's sword.
Well, I don't ever think about those sorts of things. So somebody else is going to have to answer this question.
For me, it's like, why are there so many cities in this country named after biblical towns? I mean, like, because people find it's fond to them, right? It's important to them, so they're going to play with it. If that is a literal reason, like connection that's being made for the writers,
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we know that in already the Venerable Bede knows about the Hebrew chronologies and is using is maybe not using Hebrew sources per se, but knows about the Hebrew Bible and the differences with the Septuagint and those kind of things. So we know that these traditions have made their way all the way to England in the 8th century and stuff. So it's not surprising that we find find early English legends making use of Hebrew stuff. And one of the chapters in my book on the names of the wives of the patriarchs is about the names of the daughters of Adam and Eve that make their way into, like, from Syriac. So they're given in Syriac probably in the end of the 6th century. These names are made up, and they make their way all the way into the vernacular Bibles of the Middle Ages in English, French, Dutch, German, Old Norse. So these names show up there, and so it's one of the things is just tracing that reception history of these names of the daughters of Adam and Eve that do find their way into the weirdest places that you wouldn't expect. And so, like, the way these traditions dance around, and especially names, or these kind of like Urim, it's exactly the kind of thing that you would imagine would show up in a popular religious expression somewhere.
You reminded me of a short story, which is when I was in college, I once used for a final paper as my primary source some Anglo-Saxon text that went back to the Venerable Bede. And so my professor had to call me in and kind of demonstrate that I was actually capable of using an Anglo-Saxon language source for my final paper, because he was a little skeptical about that. So that was fun.
Nice.
It turns out history professors are actually really impressed when you can use a language that they don't know that's historically relevant. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, dear.
Not a linguist.
You don't have to be a linguist to have taken, Old English earlier that semester. That's
touche.
Which is exactly what happened. Grigory Gahan for $6 US said, started working through the SBL Bible, or Study Bible, sorry. Where would you recommend laypersons begin who are pursuing the interest, but not in a formal setting?
Like the interest of biblical studies.
I actually have a recommendation that a standard recommendation I make, which is John Barton's A History of the Bible, the book and its faiths, which I think is the best introduction to a critical scholarly approach to the Bible, where it comes from, how it came together, how traditions historically have read it, because the third part is all about here's how the early Christians began to read it, began to make sense of it as scripture. Here's how Jewish people began to read it, began to make use of it as scripture. And so I think and lots of wonderful references in there. And so with a good study Bible and that history of the Bible, I think you'll be able to find and identify things you want to go chase down. And that's a good foundation for pursuing whatever the precise route you want to pursue is.
All right. So next, Satan's Guide sent in 3 super chats for $9.99 that all had mostly the same message. I think what's actually happening is he was going through and fixing
Sure,
typos.
everyone's
So what I'm going to do
yeah.
is
Oh,
An
okay.
expensive typo.
Yeah, Satan's Guide for $30, minus 3 cents, says unhumbled by these videos.
Vidiosos.
Yeah.
Videos. Okay, fair enough.
You need to do another correction there.
Well, one of the other ones had videos, so
Unhimbled.
Unhimbled. Well, praise public-facing
Valued
scholars so
libra.
needed. So let's see. So valuable, so needed. There we go.
There we go.
Between them all, we got a full super chat that was free.
Awesome.
So, and this is so amazing because text critically, we could say that we can find the original text.
We can
by
figure out
picking-
what's going on, right?
But then as manuscript scholars, we would all say that there's no one.
There's no
original-
text here. Yeah.
There's no chat.
All right.
But we get
Thank
to
you,
the point of his. We know the meaning. We know what his point is, right? That's what matters.
Philistine for
Wow.
$50 says a little something to keep y'all in unleavened bread with the little. We're either going with the blessing hand gesture or the live long and prosper hand gesture.
Mhm.
I'm not sure.
I feel like that's
QQ for you. Would Jesus have believed in things like souls or even heaven? And thanks to all of you for the true and rising value of your scholarship and engagement.
That's fun.
so
Dan.
like
Dan
So
wrote the book. Dan wrote the book on it, so I think he.
Well,
should.
I wrote a book on this as it relates to the Hebrew Bible, but also there was a little bit about the New Testament. Yeah, I think that early Judaism did believe in something that was kind of parallel to what we think of as the soul. They thought of a locus of agency, of cognition, of emotion, and things like that was separable from the corporeal body, and that constituted the person, and it was situationally emergent and different. And so Jesus probably would have thought of something like that. The Jesus we see represented in the Gospels is sometimes a little more philosophically oriented, sometimes a little more like ascetically oriented. We get a few different representations of Jesus, but a first century CE Galilean apocalyptic itinerant preacher probably would have had a concept of a soul. Heaven probably would have been a little more up in the air. You don't really get the development of concepts of postmortem punishment and rewards until just a couple centuries earlier in the Greco-Roman period. And so that's still developing. And I think a lot of people would have thought that heaven was going to be just a paradise on earth kind of thing, until you get the more philosophically sophisticated developments going on after Jesus's life. That's just my
I think in Jesus' time, one of the important things that we should be wary of is the fact that that for Jesus and for the earliest Christians, the kingdom of God was a real tangible thing that they were expecting, to take place on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the Free Thinker for $9.99 US says, what do you make of Hoffmeyer kitchen arguments for early dating of Exodus based on Egyptian etymology of names, polemics against Pharaoh, slave price matching, early and not late dates, etc.?
Well, the slave price that we find in the Covenant Code is almost identical to Hammurabi and all the other things from over 1,000 years before. So that's not a huge get there to say the prices are the same. The prices stayed the same for a long, long time. And the etymology of names, I mean, this stuff is being written when Egypt exercises quite a bit of hegemony in the region. And so it's not a huge surprise.
And has for a long time, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
Hezekiah's the seal and the impressions belonging to the king from Hezekiah have scarabs and uraeuses on them. So like this is in Egyptian territory. So it's not a surprise.
Are you saying that people can be familiar with more than one language that's around them at the time of their life?
and cultures too, right? Like there's
No.
there's cultural exchange going on.
Okay.
All right.
The People's Venus for $19.99 US It's a W. Get your minds out of the gutter. Come on, people.
They wanted us
Come
to
on,
laugh. That was
we're
the
all
point.
old enough that we saw Friends, right?
It says, hello, it's lovely seeing all of you together. How do you as individuals and as a collective guard against interpretive frameworks or scholarly consensus from being a dogma within the critical scholarly community?
Yeah. So
I mean,
that's a good question.
Yeah. And this is something I worry about an awful lot, and particularly in the way that I engage with and then represent the scholarly consensuses. And this is one of the reasons that I think we need apologists and we need more conservative scholars, because we need people to push back against us and to that's grist for the mill. That compels us to strengthen our arguments, to consider other possibilities. And so I think that's all necessary friction. And without it, it does become more dogmatic. But I think the main key is just constantly being self-critical and constantly the academy has to keep reevaluating these things. And I think the academy does a really good job of that. I mean, it's not flying off into left field as much as some people try to make it sound like it is.
Well, it's the opposite, I would say. Like that's so. I think for me, he said personally and collectively. So personally, I think this is a really big deal because it's really easy for the things you work with every day to not get stuck on the idea that there's a consensus, because you realize that everything you read, everything you're doing, you're seeing people are always challenging the consensus. And so that's what research is kind of taking the consensus and saying, well, what about this little piece, or what about that little piece? And occasionally someone comes and says, we have to throw out the whole consensus because now we have enough of these little bits and pieces. And that's what scholarship is. But the problem is when it's not your field. And so like when you're really into something, you're reading all the stuff, you're in it, you're aware of what's going on. But when it's not, you might think that the consensus is where you were when you were in grad school, and you just haven't read the more advanced literature in the meantime. And that's where it can become dogmatic, because you don't have you don't have anything to strengthen or to argue for, and you just say, well, the consensus is this or that or the other. And so I think that's like, for me, it's that scholarship doesn't get stuck on consensuses, because that's like every young scholar out there is looking for an angle to be able to contribute something, to write their PhD on, to do their postdoc on, to advance scholarship. And that means challenging something. But for me personally, it's about listening to other people, trying to learn and trying to let other people contribute to the fields where they are actually experts.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that frustrates me to no end when people say, oh, the academy is just writing dissertations to prove that everything everybody already agrees with is true. It's like, you know absolutely nothing about the academy, because you can't even propose a PhD without saying you're going to change something.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to just say here, we're probably going to we could probably only go for about another 15 minutes or so. There are a pile of super chats, so if we can just blitz through these quickly, and please, people, stop sending them in, because we got to get going.
All right, from now on, all responses 5-second max. Here we go. Ready?
And only super chats.
Olive Blake, $4.99.
Yes.
Do you think critical scholarship has a PR problem? Also, how long do you think until the conclusions of scholarship are widely accepted in the United States?
I think we're working on that. I think there is a bit of a PR problem, and I think we're doing what we can to try to make it more accessible.
Of these. Yeah, more of this kind of stuff. Sorry, guys.
No, I agree.
All right. Kyle Pratt for $4.99 says, my headcanon is that Jephthah's daughter and her companions had a 2-month or why to mourn her virginity. Yeah.
Yeah. That was also, that's one thing that I've wondered about reading that text is what does it mean to go out into the woods or into the wilderness to mourn your virginity? Did that mean to live it up for that period of time? I don't, but I don't have any other reason than my headcanon, like Kyle Pratt says. I haven't ever looked into it, but I've thought that same thing.
And this is also probably just some dude making up the story. And so,
yeah.
Yep. Robin Webster for $2 says, appreciate all the work.
Thank you, Robin.
And PI returns with a €2.25 super chat to say,
Nice.
love your content. I follow all your channels, even though apparently everyone here is going to hell. Supreme Scientist for $5 says, the Bible says his servants will serve him, Revelation 22:3. Am I wrong to consider this slavery in heaven? Curious what scholarship says about it.
I agree.
2, 3. I mean, yeah, I think that the servants is usually slave in the Greek.
Yeah, doulos doesn't have a whole lot of difference from slavery there.
Yeah, and that's a repeated ideology that you should be a slave to Christ. Throughout the New
Absolutely.
Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah, early Christianity buys it. It's
Paul calls himself a slave of Christ.
So one interesting thing is, for a while I was attending a church whose primary language was actually Arabic, and a lot of the times doulos in Greek was translated as abd, which is cognate with eved and just means slave.
Oh.
Yep. So that's at least how some of the Arab Christians are thinking about it, and those translations go back quite a ways too. So it's a long-standing thing in Christianity in a lot of different cultures. Wait,
well, that's what the name Abdullah means, right? It's,
Abdullah means slave of God. And then all the other things that you have, like Abdul Rahman, those are all the 99 names of God that are stereotypical names in Arabic. Wayne Wright, Christian thinker and heretic, for $20 says, does the argument in Hebrews 10:1-10 have real theological issues? Psalm 40 in most Bibles doesn't read that way. His whole argument is based on the way the Septuagint, I think, renders it. Which ones occur in the Septuagint or Hebrew?
Boy, yeah, I'd have to get into it.
Real theological. So, I mean, even just the question about real theological issues, I would, without even seeing, I pulled it up really quickly, but since the law has only a shadow of the good things, yada yada. If we're talking about laws and sacrifices, I'm just going to go out on a limb, and I know that this I shouldn't. I probably shouldn't. There's a lot. There are a lot of theological issues in the Book of Hebrews. Period. It's highly anti-Judaic. It's highly X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's just a very, in my opinion, very biased and strong opinion. It's a horrific book in general. So when you want to take the theological claims and trust them, that concerns me, without getting into the specifics of this passage.
But I do know the a body you have prepared for me. I'm almost certain that doesn't line up with the Hebrew. That is a Septuagintal kind of departure from the Hebrew.
All right. Kitsune for £5 says, do you think that Dunil in the Ugaritic story of Akhat is one of the righteous ones mentioned in Ezekiel, despite being a Baal worshiper?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. And you have to wonder at this point how much, how far widespread this tradition is, and what it looked like for Ezekiel if he had it. There's no guarantee that it was static or the same as how it survived at Ugarit, right? Because those texts are like 12th century.
All right. This is definitely from one of my subscribers. You can tell because of the very strange name. Beta Great Brown Unicellular Wedding Chapel for $5 says, y'all are awesome. Always happy to see a dinosaur linguist, which you're still not seeing. What are your thoughts on Apologia's minimal witness theory?
Minimal witness theory.
I'm not familiar with Apologia's minimal witness theory.
Any of you guys familiar with Apologia's minimal witnesses theory? I am a little bit, so maybe I'll tackle this. I think it's interesting. Apologia's theory is that only Peter and I think maybe one other disciple had post-bereavement hallucinations of Jesus and managed to convince everybody, and over time this became Christianity. I will say, I think the one, I would agree with Dale Allison here, that the one thing that I think is challenging for Apologia is the fact that in the earliest creed that we have, there is specific mention of Jesus appearing to the 12, not just to Peter and to James. So, but he's got some good ideas in there, definitely.
All right. AL Goose for $2 Canadian says, thanks all. I'm going to read Dr. Bird's book on my flight.
Thanks.
Nice.
Taylor for $2 US says, "Did Platonism, there we go, affect Judaism or Christianity?"
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Next.
Moving on.
Christianity is the reason that Platonism is still around. That it is as well known as it is.
I think, yeah.
Actually,
I mean,
one place you still see a lot of Platonic thinking is with young Earth creationists when they talk about different kinds of animals, as if animals actually participated in ideal kinds that pre-exist in the realm of thoughts, which isn't how anything works.
Like animalness or chairness. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, guys, this isn't how reality works. Sorry. Hayden Tank for €5.99 says, "Any book recommendations for ancestral/animist worship influences on ancient Near East Israelite cultic practices?"
Oh. I don't know any offhand.
Well, I could say my book, which talks about
Hold it back up.
Adonai's Divine Images, a cognitive approach, which is an open access volume. You can access the PDF freely online, which tries to build up a theoretical framework for concepts of deity from how we perceive personhood, how we perceive the self, how we perceive the world around us. And so I talk a little bit about ideas of spirits and spirit possession and all that kind of stuff, and how that contributes to ideas about post-mortem existence in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in Anatolia, in Ugarit, and places like that, and how that relates to the Bible. So there's going to be some of that in here, and more discussion in the references.
There's a really interesting suggestion in the chat: caring for the ancient and dead, for the dead, and I'm tired, in ancient Israel. I'm not familiar with, but I imagine that they know. Yeah, it's worth considering.
That's Carrie Sonia's book, "Caring for the Dead in Ancient Israel," which is talking an awful lot about ancestral worship and necromancy.
Thank you.
All right, Constellation Pegasus for $19.99 US says, "What is the oldest rabbinic commentary that is useful to understand the Old Testament?"
Well, the oldest rabbinic
depends on what you
commentary
mean.
would be, I mean, the oldest material you probably find in the Mishnah. And then, I guess
Constellation Pegasus knows this. This is I think Constellation Pegasus knows generally what they're talking about very well.
Probably.
Yeah, and they're referencing the commentary about the rabbinics.
So what I don't know what I think depends on. I mean, I don't think there's rabbinic commentary material that helps us with a historical reading of the Old Testament.
Right.
But I think that the rabbinic commentaries are all very interesting as they help us understand how people were reading and interpreting scripture in different places at different times, and the development of the idea of what those scriptures meant to them. And that's so I mean, I think that's all valuable in every case. So it just depends on what you want. But yeah.
All right, Deep Drinks for $2.99 Australian dollars says, "Favorite sin?" We could just go around like Kip. What's your favorite sin?
Mine is mixing fabrics. I don't know about you guys.
Okay. Let's go counterclockwise.
So I'll just say that
we don't.
I'm not answering.
Okay.
Mine's Diet Dr. Pepper. So,
okay. Matt, you got one?
Favorite sin? I tend to ignite fires on the Sabbath. So.
Oh, okay. Now I would say eating unclean foods, but I've been told on reasonably good authority that the mitzvot don't apply to dinosaurs. So I guess I can't give one eating a dinosaur.
Maybe you have there's nothing, right?
That's freedom in the dinosaur.
Freedom.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, to be fair, the Bible doesn't say anything about non-humans eating unclean food. Seems to just be okay with that. So, all right. I'm not sure.
The Bible doesn't say anything about non-Jews eating unclean food either. So,
I mean, yeah, there is that too, right? That's fair. Javon, I think it's Javon. I'm not sure. Buford for $5 says, "Any thoughts or knowledge on the subject of the Holy Spirit being known as the Divine Mother and the subject on the cosmic Christ? Anything at all?"
My first thought was this yeah, give me a second to come up with a name. The book, the title, Holy Misogyny, Deconic. April Deconic, I think is her name, talks about, that was the source for me, at least, learning about some of the baptismal fonts in Egypt, in Alexandria, that are in the shape of a vulva, and the references to, the Holy Spirit being the mother, so Mother, Father, Son in the Trinity. So that's the source I would send you to get some primary sources on that, because I don't know them off the top of my head.
All right, Daniel Wesley for $5 says, "Is an intertextual approach to Scripture a viable means for scholars to demonstrate the history of text and the evolution of ideas to lay readers?"
I mean, there are words and concepts in there that most scholars wouldn't use in talking about this, but recognizing how texts are making use of other texts is absolutely a big part of trying to arrange them chronologically and relatively, and then trying to understand how they're developing and making use of each other.
All right, and here is our last super chat, and it is from Lady Wasser for $9.99 US, who says, "I'm at work at 35,000 feet." Actually, I guess it says 35.000 thousand feet. It's a very, very exact altitude right there.
Very precise.
Yeah.
Just stopping by to say hi to the dream team, and since the video isn't loaded, I won't be able to hear Dr. Bird laughing, unfortunately.
Wow. But Lady Was is gonna watch later, because she always does. What a world, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Watching a live YouTube feed at 30.
And I appreciate the positive vote on my laugh, given some of the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, it's been almost 3 hours. There are still 580 people watching.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you. I know,
So
right?
fun.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming out. I mean, ordinarily we talk a little bit about what we're doing, what's upcoming.
Not today.
We're good.
Not today. I think we're good. So we're gonna shut it down, and we will see you in a month.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thanks for
and
helping
have
us.
Thanks, everybody.
a great day. Later.
Bye, everybody.